Halliburton's got the ball. Halliburton rises up. And then the whistle. Oh, my goodness. Tyrese Halliburton hits a three and is fouled.
You have got to be kidding me.
McConnell underneath the basket. Looking. Toppin in the corner for three.
Oh, yeah! Yeah! OB!
Pacers have it, a chance to tie.
Yeah, Nembhard
hits the three. Nembhard gives Indiana the lead.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Pacers Fever Show, your new go-to spot for all things professional basketball in the Hoosier State. I'm your host, Logan, and I couldn't be more excited to finally launch this podcast and share my passion with all of you, the fans of the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever. For as long as I can remember, I've been a fan of the Indiana Pacers, and a recent love for the game and the Indiana Fever prompted me to do this podcast all the way back from the Reggie days, all the way up to the current team with Tyrese Halliburton, Caitlin Clark. I'm so excited to have a platform where we can talk about all things Indiana professional basketball. So join me on this journey. I'm very excited to have you all here. If you wouldn't mind, hit the subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, add it to your playlist. If you're going for the podcast audio version on Spotify, Apple Music, we're everywhere that you can find those podcasts where you listen to your podcast. We can be found, and I really appreciate the support. As always, I'm looking for somebody to join me as a co-host. So if you're interested in joining this podcast, then just shoot me a DM over on X or on Facebook, where you can find our pages as well. Instagram works too. So I'll be posting there throughout the playoffs as we're getting ready to launch into the NBA playoffs. And I thought that this would be a really nice first episode to launch into the Indiana Pacers and their first round playoff with the Milwaukee Bucks. So if you're here, pull up a chair, grab some snacks. Let's talk about the Indiana Pacers. It is playoff basketball time in the beautiful city of Indianapolis, and I cannot wait. That means warm weather up there for those people that are in Indy. I'm originally from Indianapolis, but I currently live in Orlando, Florida. I've been following the Pacers ever since I can remember. My dad and my grandfather were huge Pacer fans, and the family's just kind of kept that tradition going. We go to Indy often, as we still do have family up there. And I'm looking forward to following the Pacers and what they do this year in the 2025 NBA playoffs. They will again face off against the Milwaukee Bucks, a rivalry that really has began ever since their time in existence together. These two teams have just never really liked each other, dating back to the Reggie Miller days. And fast forward to now, we will have probably played over 20 games against them in the last 2 years if this series goes as long as I think it will. So buckle up. It's going to be a really fun ride. I'm hoping to be doing these podcasts up through May and even June. So that can kind of give you a hint as to where I think maybe this Pacers team might be able to go. But again, leave those comments. What do you think about the Indiana Pacers grabbing that number 4 seed? That was a very important goal that the team had heading into the 2024-2025 NBA season. Last year, they were on the road against the Bucks. They were as the 6th seed last year. Milwaukee had the 3rd seed. And last year, just kind of recapping that playoff series, that first game, the Pacers the Bucks jumped out to a 27-point lead at halftime. The Pacers looked shell-shocked. Pascal Siakam, 36-37 points in the first 2 games against Milwaukee. Really kept this team afloat as they tried to get their arms around the idea that they were in a playoff series. Last year, they were without Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Giannis is going to play in this series. The opposite's going to be the story for Damian Lillard, who is going to likely be out for at least the beginning of this series. But again, it didn't sound very likely the more they've talked about it that he'll be ready for this first round matchup against the Indiana Pacers. And really, that's all the update that we're probably going to get. If you remember last year, Giannis was out for that series, and every single game, it seemed like we were getting Giannis updates. Giannis is taking some light work on the court. Giannis is doing this. Giannis is doing that. And by the time the series was wrapping up, Giannis was still in street clothes and not playing in this series. I'm assuming it's going to be that same kind of thing for the Milwaukee Bucks and Damian Lillard. Unfortunately, due to that deep vein thrombosis that he's dealing with, which is just an awful storyline. Victor Wembanyama is struggling with the same kind of thing. Those are life-threatening injuries. You don't have life-threatening injuries typically in the NBA, but you've got two very good players that are currently sidelined with that health issue, and so we're wishing all the best for Dame. You don't ever want to see that, right? You don't ever want to see the other team losing a player to be injured. Especially with something like that. I mean, Dame's got to worry about a family, his kid, his wife. I mean, it's just there's so much to wrap into that, and it's so much deeper than basketball. So we're hoping that Dame gets healthy, and if we see Dame in this series, I think it'll make it an even better series. But I mean, looking forward to this series, you got the 4 versus 5 seed, the Pacers, again, home court advantage, which is a massive get for the Indiana Pacers. Like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, that was the goal heading into the season. Rick Carlisle and a lot of those preseason interviews was talking to the press and the media about the fact that this was the goal, home court advantage. They wanted to get away from that first game being on the road. And I'll share a fun fact about the fact that they did get that 4 seed. But let's go through what the game schedule looks like. We're going to talk a little bit about some TV scheduling things that are going on that I find very interesting. And it's always interesting. And I think the Bucks and the Pacers are kind of used to this just because of the location where their teams are and the market size of the teams and the fan base that supports them. But let's go through it. Game 1 starts Saturday, April 19th. The Milwaukee Bucks will go to Indianapolis to play the Pacers at 1 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN. They kick off the playoffs. So that's a lot of pressure and excitement, I think, for both teams. You're launching the NBA playoffs with, I think, the best series and best rivalry, I think, at least in the Eastern Conference. And, I know there are other teams that'll probably have some things to say that we are not the best rivalry, but between Ballgate, when Giannis scored his career high, and Oscar getting his first points last year, to the scuffle that they had there. You've had the Bobby Portis stuff constantly with the Pacers. Chris Middleton, he used to just crush the Pacers. He was like that one-man wrecking machine against Indiana. So he added some fire to this series. Tyrese Halliburton is from the Milwaukee surrounding area. So he grew up in that area. So, the people are used to seeing him there. He's always got a big family turnout whenever they do head over to Milwaukee to play the Bucks. There's just so many aspects to this that I think are interesting. You've got Nemhard, and you had like the Pat Beverly, Neesmith kind of dynamic last season. I think they've kind of lost some of those edges. Bobby Portis is really the only one still around that's kind of got that edge against the Indiana Pacers. Obviously, Giannis has always got an edge against the Pacers. I think he always performs better, and it's not like saying that he's really bad against other teams, because he's an MVP caliber player, obviously, and one of the best players, if not the best player in the world. Jokic would probably be the only other one that can kind of compare to what Giannis does to a team. But again, you talk about these teams, they don't like each other. Tyrese was actually interviewed yesterday by media. It was, I think, their first practice that they had open with media yesterday, and Tyrese was basically, he came out and said, he goes, "We don't like each other, and we prefer that. Like, we don't, they're in division rivals, even though divisions don't really matter over anything anymore." Eastern Conference is so jam packed with good talent this year, up and coming talent, and I think it's really exciting to kind of see what the Pacers can do, right, in these in this matchup. So again, that first game is going to be in Indiana. Sorry, I kind of got sidetracked there, but game 2, Tuesday, April 22nd. So they've got a long break between game 1 and game 2, which is kind of weird. The NBA always tends to go to the one off day, and then you play the next day, and then you travel and might have some extra days when you have to travel. But that's not the case between game 1 and game 2. Game 2 is actually going to be Tuesday, April 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern time on NBA TV. And we'll talk a little bit about that after the next game that I talk about. So They then travel to Milwaukee, and that's again when you have that extra day typically, but they have the extra day. So I don't know. I don't know if the scheduling was so they can kind of balance out because of the play-in games and the TV slots. I think that's has a lot to do with it. The play-in tournaments kind of thrown some things off from normal expectations of what series looks like. But Friday, April 25th, Indiana at Milwaukee at 8 p.m. Eastern time on ESPNU, which I didn't know still existed, and NBA TV. And then game 4, Sunday, April 27th, Indiana at Milwaukee at 9:30 Eastern time on TNT. I mean, that's an 8:30 start in Milwaukee. I get that. But Indianapolis is in the East Coast time zone, and where I am, I'm East Coast time zone. 9:30, that's a brutal start on a Sunday night for really any team, unless you're the West Coast. Like I get it, but yeah. So that I mean that's a late start. That'll be interesting. Game 4 in Milwaukee. Then if Game 5 is necessary, April 29th. They go back to Indiana. Time to be determined. Game 6 Friday, May 2nd. That is again if necessary, and that time is to be determined. That will be in Milwaukee. And then if there is a game 7 needed, that'll be Sunday, May 4th in Indianapolis. Again, that time to be determined. Just depends on what the other series do and who they put above the Pacers. Because let's talk about it. The Pacers kind of got the raw end of the deal here. They ended up with 2 games and games that are going to be vital in this series. I marked game 1's the most crucial, I believe. I mean, unless you get to game 7 is always going to be the most crucial. But game 1 is very important. It's a very important game for Indiana to come out and at least put their foot down and say, this is our home territory. We are going to defend it and force Milwaukee to try to win game 2. Because if Indiana leaves Indianapolis with a 2-0 series lead, I really like the Pacers' chances to limit this maybe to a 5-game series. If they split this series, which is typically what a 4-5 series might end up being, is I think a majority of the time you'll see the 5th team really put up a battle and at least get one of those games to take back home, because then it's natural for that team to go back home with a 1-1 and come back with a 2-2 back to Indianapolis. It's just kind of way the 4 and 5 kind of rock out. So yeah, I would say game 1's the most important, but the game 3 and game 4 results are going to be massive in this series. Those are the middle games in these series. Could be the end, depending on how Indy does at home. But you put those games on ESPNU and NBA TV. I know there's some TV packages that have actually dropped ESPNU. I know that there's some TV packages that don't have NBA TV. It's really strange that they've done this, and all these games can be found on FanDuel with Chris Denary and Quinn Buckner. So you can find them if you've paid for the package. You can find them on your local TV stations if you do get that FanDuel Sports channel with Denary and Buckner usually. This is the last series. I didn't know this. This is the last series that Chris Denary and Quinn Buckner will be doing, because the next TV deal that goes into place next season, local markets will not be able to cover their teams in the playoffs, which is a real bummer, because I think there are a lot of people that like to stay with the local guys throughout the playoffs up until a certain point. I think ABC, ESPN are typically, because they're owned by Disney, they're typically the only ones that have that restrictive. They're not going to allow you to put local television on the game and show that to go with the national broadcast of ESPN. So that completely ends this year. So this is the last time that we'll be able to enjoy Chris and Quinn for the foreseeable future. So maybe another TV deal is done, or they negotiate that to where the local guys can cover their team. I typically will watch on national television because I do like, I actually do like kind of the shock and awe aspect of national broadcasters having to cover something that the Pacers do well. I always like it. It kind of fuels my flames, and I know it does with the players as well, the fan base. I like when they kind of give us a hard time or don't really give us much love on the national channels, because then when the Pacers start to do well, they kind of run out of things to say because they can't keep talking about how good Giannis is if the Pacers are stomping all over Giannis. They can't keep talking about Jalen Brunson and the Knicks if the Pacers are a commanding lead or they go win Game 7 in the Garden. It's hard to talk about Jalen Brunson when he's not out there playing in Game 7 and the Pacers are marching away with that series. So again, it's just those kind of things really fuel me as a fan. I love those. I think it's a lot of fun because honestly, I think it's one thing that adds to the Pacers' fire here in the playoffs. I think that's always helped. They've never done well as the favorite. It's much better to be the underdog. And I've seen a lot of people picking Giannis and the Bucks in 6 games too. So I think, if you're Rick, that's something that you can kind of point out, but that's not something that the players I don't think are focusing too much on. But they know. You've had the press conferences with guys like Roy Hibbert back in like 2013, 2014 when he was saying you guys don't watch us, but in a much more colorful language kind of way. Tyrese has said similar things where how do you guys know? Miles Turner too, where Miles is very vocal about because he's been there the longest. He's been longest tenured Pacer at this point on this roster, and he's talked about multiple times where they just don't pay attention to the Indiana Pacers because they don't feel like they really care much about what the Pacers doing because they're not as cool as the other teams from the bigger markets. So that's another thing too. Is I kind of wanted to say that where every time that this happens, I'm not really shocked by it anymore. It does make me kind of mad just because this is, again, they're running back round one from last year, same round or same teams this year, just a different seeding. And I arguably think that this could be the best rivalry in the NBA right now. These teams really just do not like each other. It's got an old school vibe. But I understand, right? You're going to get more TV audience with, like a team like the Knicks playing, even though they're playing Detroit. Like the Knicks fans there's much more to kind of enjoy about the Knicks when they're giving you a lot of money because they're on TV. They're not giving you money, but they're making you a lot of money because they're the bigger market. So I get it. I understand when Boston, New York, when you've got teams like that getting it would be the Cavs and Pacers series. If that happens, that would be just a national TV disaster, I would think, just for the aspect of just not being two big markets. Cleveland and Indianapolis are not big TV markets. But again, we like that. So that's what we're hoping for, obviously, as Pacer fans, to get in there and show them that we can play with just about anybody. So let's get into it. Let's get into the preview for the number 4 seed Pacers and number 5 seed Milwaukee Bucks. The Pacers, just to kind of recap, and we got the rundown on the YouTube channel so you can actually see the visual, but the rundown is going to go like this. We're going to recap the Pacers 2024-2025 season. Not too in depth, but we're going to talk about some of the key things that came out of this year's team. We're going to talk about early season struggles and what that looked like because that infected both of these teams. You have the Pacers playoff matchup. We're going to talk about the Pacers versus the Bucks and what they did this season and how that will have implications on the series going forward. And then we're going to preview what's happening in this this matchup. Then we're going to get into the Bucks season recap. We're going to talk a little bit about what the Bucks did and kind of things that we can highlight to then discuss some rotations, X factors. We're going to talk about some keys for each team, and then we're going to give our series prediction without giving too much away. I'm going to try to do that as I go throughout the episode. And again, hit that subscribe button if you are on YouTube, and then follow along on the podcast. The more that you guys share it, the more that you're interested in commenting, whatever it might be, engaging with the content, the better we can make the content. And then the more that people can see this and we can talk about all things Pacers together. I want to build that community. We've got some great podcasts in this community. I love Setting the Pace with Alex and Facci. I love the Sideline Guys with Jeremiah Johnson and Pat Boylan. I love Caitlin Cooper, about to say Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Cooper does her show, which is a great listen as well. So I just kind of want to join that community and where we can all talk about the Pacers, and they do such a great job that they've inspired me to jump into feet first into this Pacers stuff. So let's get into it. Fourth in the Eastern Conference, Indiana Pacers 50-32. Their first 50-win season. Sorry, there's a tongue twister. Since 2013-2014, when they went 56-26 that season under Frank Vogel. That was their number 1 playoff seed. And I believe that was when they were bounced out by the Heat in Eastern Conference Finals. They started David West, Roy Hibbert, Paul George, Lance Stevenson, and George Hill. and that was a fantastic team. I think if the Pacers started well this season, they would have challenged that record just because a 10-15 start was just not ideal for this Indiana Pacers team, and that's where it started. It was not a very good start to the NBA season for these Pacers, especially with a team that had high expectations. When you do that in the first quarter, sorry, the first third of your season, I really feel like people are going to write you off, and I think that's what happened with the Pacers. And I think that's what's affected some of the or ideas that come for this Pacer team. When you got national guys that, for instance, Chandler Parsons, when they were talking, I forget who he was talking. I think it was Lou Williams, but they were talking about Indiana, and they were talking about how good the Bucks were and how good Giannis is. And over the last, 20 to 30 games, he's really shown that he is the best player in the world. And then they asked about the Pacers, and he goes, yeah, I think this was Lou Williams, but he was like, yeah, I don't really watch them. So they're going to lose to the Bucks. And that's what he said. And it was unbelievable. Like, just, we get the disrespect all the time, and the great thing is the Pacers Twitter just dropped the video. So if you haven't checked that out, go check out the Pacers social media channels. They dropped a video of this. I think it was yesterday. But they were talking about how the national media doesn't respect them. So I think this year's line is like, you don't have to give us respect. We're going to take it, which I love. I love that. I give me a shirt that says that we don't need your respect. We're just going to take it. Indiana Pacers playoffs, like that. That's what the playoff shirt should be. That's just a lot of fun. And I'm excited to kind of see what the Pacers do with that chip on their shoulder. But yeah, when you start off a season 10-15, that's where it really starts to kind of infect people's idea and bias about you. I think that was essentially what caused people to think that the Pacers weren't really much of a formidable opponent or challenge to the bigger teams in the Eastern Conference. And we'll talk about that as we get further and further into the playoffs, hopefully, just how much they think Cleveland's better. Boston's, when they're talking about teams that come out of the East, they always mention Cleveland, Boston, and the New York Knicks. And that's where it stops. They say even, and then there's oftentimes where they even clump in the Bucks if Giannis can get going and really carry this team, because he's got that ability to carry a team through these other bigger Eastern Conference teams that have full, rosters of guys rather than just the one big world's greatest superstar. And that's no offense to the Bucks. That's just there's such a drop off between the Knicks second, Boston second, Cleveland second to what the Bucks second best option looks like right now, especially without Dame. So Pacers stats this season: points per game, 117.4, which was seventh of 30 teams in the NBA. And that went up to 119.8 a game post All-Star break. So I put all the post All-Star break numbers in here, especially for the Pacers and the Bucks, because they were just so bad to start the season. And we'll get into the Bucks struggles as well. Opponent points per game, 115.1. Defensively, they were 17th of 30, but the Pacers were able to hold teams to 114.3 post All-Star, and their defensive rating and their defensive points allowed, they became one of the top 10 to 8 defenses in the NBA post All-Star break. And they are not an elite defense. They're not going to shut you down. And oftentimes it might not even be something that you notice throughout the game. But at the end of the day, when you check the final box score, when you check, what the Pacers did and how they went on this run that they've gone on over, the last 40 some odd games that they played, I think the biggest thing that you can point to is defensively, they got so much better. They aren't the high octane offense necessarily that they were last year. Obviously, that was a almost historic team in the way that they played and the pace in which they set last season, which I don't think was sustainable anyway, especially if you're going to play better defense. When you score that many points, you got more opportunities where you have to defend. So no matter how good the team is playing against you, if you score more points, the ball is going to go to the other team more often than not too. So that's one thing that I think helped the Pacers is, I wouldn't say lack of offense, but the offensive dip was more due to the fact that that was just not sustainable. They did keep up a very efficient shooting percentage, one of the best in the league still. I think they're second in the NBA in field goal percentage over the season. and or second or third, and the Bucks are right up there with them. And that's just because the Pacers just are so efficient offensively. They've got very efficient players. I would argue that probably the first four players in their starting roster, starting lineup, are for the most efficient players offensively. They don't turn the ball over a ton, and so that that's going to make for more shot opportunities and different things like that. You got Tyrese, who is the best point guard, I think, in the Eastern Conference. I mean, obviously, there's going to be some debate over that, but he just does things that are just so special. And we'll talk about how special Tyrese is as we get more into breaking down like matchup to matchup and player to player. I kind of want to break it down to where it's easier to kind of talk about different things. We're going to talk about matchups. We'll talk about starting lineups. We'll talk about rotations and what we might see from Rick Carlisle and Doc Rivers with the Bucks, because I think it's one of the most interesting, because it's not your typical matchup against your counterpart, like point guard versus point guard. It's much more of a defensive fluidity between guys who defend who. But yeah, we'll talk about that. And then looking at pace. So this was something that, again, that the Pacers weren't going to be able to sustain with that really high octane offense where they were easily one of the fastest teams to play. They were 100.76 according to NBA.com, seventh of 30 teams. And if you aren't sure what pace is measured by, it's an estimate of number of possessions per 48 minutes by a team. The only teams higher than the Indiana Pacers this year, we'll start at the top. Memphis Grizzlies with 103.69, the Chicago Bulls at 103.6. You had the Hawks at 103.4, the Wizards at 101.8, the Oklahoma City Thunder at 100.9, and the Utah Jazz at 100.8. If you notice anything about those teams, those are I would say two of those teams are some of the worst teams in the NBA, with the Wizards and the Jazz. And then you got teams that were either in the playoff play-in games with the Hawks, Bulls, and Grizzlies. And then you have the best team in the NBA in Oklahoma City Thunder up there at a very high pace as well. But that's really good company as far as if the Pacers are looking at Oklahoma City. Like if you're looking at Oklahoma City, they're getting more opportunities to score more baskets, more possessions. The Pacers were really high in possessions, and we'll talk about how crucial that can be against a Milwaukee team that is also very efficient in their scoring abilities, but might not necessarily have the most possessions. And we'll talk why that might be. Because a team that efficient and they're not nearly close enough to what the Pacers are as far as possession numbers are concerned, there's a little bit of a dip, and I'll tell you why that might be. Offensive rating 115.4, ninth in the NBA out of the 30th. Interesting note, Pacers were 13th in offensive rating after the All-Star break. So again, kind of a regression from that the offensive rating after the All-Star break. But the difference again here is the defensive rating went up. So 1.1 or 113, so 113.3, 14th of 30 in the NBA. But seeing that offensive rating go down kind of would have been alarming. But if you look at what happened after the All-Star break with the defense, it was in the top 8 defensively for defensive rating. So that efficiency of the defense went up like 5 spots, 4 spots, or no, 5, 6 spots in the Eastern Conference. Or in the NBA is tremendous. Again, I just think the defense looks so much more cohesive. And I think part of that reason is guys are buying in more. Tyrese has made, I think, a significant improvement in some of the stuff that he's done. I wouldn't say that he's a good defender by any stretch, but I have seen things from Tyrese that you wouldn't have seen last year. I think he's healthier. I think that not having that hamstring bother him is a huge thing for the Indiana Pacers that not a lot of people are talking about also with this series this season compared to last. But again, Tyrese has just been unbelievable offensively, but I think he's done better defensively. I think Benedict Mathurin's done better defensively. And then you don't really have to worry about Nembhard, Nesmith, and Miles Turner because they're very good defensively. And then Pascal Siakam does a very decent job defensively, just not against Giannis. And that's another thing we'll discuss. But again, I think Indiana's defense is gotten a lot better. You can't be in the second half of the defense. Like you can't be 16th through 30th. That just doesn't work for a team trying to contend for a title. Those teams are typically, those title contending teams are in the top half at least of defensive efficiency and rating. So net rating 2.1 over the season. Again, I think a lot of that has to do with just how good Indiana's been defensively compared to what they have done in the past. Also, a lot of that has to do with the play of Tyrese Halliburton and ranking second in the league in turnover percentage. He just doesn't turn the ball over. And I think, they've been better offensively in this final stretch of 40 some games just because he's been unworldly. And we'll talk about those numbers soon. Second most possessions in the league post All-Star break. That's going to always help you in the long run. And then post All-Star break, they only gave up 15.2 points off of turnovers, which is fourth best in the NBA. They gave up just 11.9 points in the fast break, which is best in the league. They did struggle defensively, giving up points in the paint. That's another thing we'll discuss in this preview. 54 points per game in post All-Star games. That's the worst in the league. And and that's kind of a testament to just how how good this defense can be at times, but not good. It's kind of that even keel where you do something right, but you don't do something too right because it's not great. I guess I didn't explain that very well, but that's the hard part about not having co-host. I get tongue-tied and I get tired just because I've been talking so much, but bear with me. There might be some pauses of like getting a drink, which I think I'll do. But again, I think, looking at the Pacers, they're better defensively than they were last season. They're not quite as good offensively, but that doesn't mean by anything that they are one of the worst offensive teams. They are still a very good offensive team. But yeah, let's talk about the leaders for the 2024-2025 Pacers. So Pascal Siakam led in points per game at 20 points per game. Assists, Tyrese Halliburton, 9.2. Rebounds, Siakam, 6.9. Minutes, Halliburton, 33.6. Field goal percentage, Toppin was the highest field goal percentage as far as qualifying players. I think Tony Bradley was up there really high, but again, he hasn't played as many games. I think technically in non-qualifying games, I think like James Wiseman and somebody else was up there, and I was like, what? Moses Brown, maybe. 3-point percentage, Nesmith in 45 games has hit 43% from deep. That is a really good percentage for those keeping score at home. Free throw percentage, Aaron Nesmith, again, 91%. Mr. Clutch is always hitting free throws in times where it matters, especially down this stretch where the Pacers have not played as well in the first couple of quarters or the first half. And then they turned it on late. Nesmith late at the line has been money. So hopefully we didn't jinx that, but he's been phenomenal. And it's something that I think is very worth noting just because of how good Aaron Nesmith has been since returning from that ankle injury that he had, that he's missed 30 some odd games. So again, that was a big turning point in the season. So talking about just kind of a quick recap of the season, if you look at the schedule, 10 of 25 games is never good. If you win 10 games of your first 25, you're typically not talking about the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference. You're talking about, let's try to avoid the playoff or play-in series, whatever they're calling it, play-in tournament. Let's try to avoid that because we got off such a bad start. But this Pacer team got hot quick, and I mean really quick. So you go for whatever that 10 of 15. So you go 40 of your last that's 25 games. 40. Well, I can't do math very well. Obviously, that's not my strong suit. What was their record? Hold on, I had that note. So they were. Let's just do the math then. 15. So 17. They're 40. 40 and 17 in their last 57 games. That's unheard of. Like, that's crazy. That there's only top teams that have done that. I think Cleveland and Oklahoma City are the only other teams in the NBA that had done that. So what a great turnaround for these Pacers to get back to where they wanted, to set that goal at the beginning of the season to be the number 4 seed. Tremendous work by these Pacers, and we'll hope that continues throughout the playoffs. They match up against the Bucks team that, how about said Jordan, like he was on this podcast. That's my co-host in another podcast. But again, the Bucks, 5th in the Eastern Conference. They went 48 and 34. And they struggled tremendously to start the season. The Milwaukee Bucks were not a very good team, and actually, I was really concerned about them just in the fact that like it looked like Doc Rivers had lost the locker room. It looked like the players weren't interested. It kind of had that feeling of like if they don't get this turnaround quickly, Giannis was going to start to get unhappy, and who knows what and that's something that can still happen. He's been leaning more and more towards leaving Milwaukee, I think, than staying, just because of how bad they have been, and their first round exits have not been good over the last couple of years. To get bounced 3 years in a row would just be not great for Giannis Antetokounmpo and his want and desire to stay in Milwaukee. But they won their first game against Philadelphia 124-109, which looks like a great win because of what people thought Philadelphia was going to be this year. But then they go and rattle off 6 straight losses. They were 2 in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They were 2-10, and then went 4-10, and then lost again. Went on a hot streak, and then started to kind of turn their season around. There were moments where they'd go on these 3 to 4 game. It was very up and down. And now that I look at it, this is the first time I ever really kind of broke down the Bucks schedule, just kind of looking at wins, losses. I mean, it looks like they've gone 4 straight losses. Then they would go like 6-8, 6 of their win the next 6 of 8, and then they would lose again, the 3-game losing streak, and then a 4-game losing streak. And then to end the season, they actually went 8 straight wins. So they are much like the Pacers. They started really poorly. And I mean, I would even say worse than the Pacers were. And then finally got hot at the right time and are still scorching hot as we head into the postseason, because the Pacers went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of 8. They won their last 7 of 8. And they were extremely hot. They did not lose much from March 11th on. They'd only lost March 11th on. They only lost 4 games. And one of those arguably could have been a win against LeBron and Luka, had it not been for LeBron's tip-in at the end. So, I mean, this Pacers team has been on an extraordinary run. So have the Bucks. So these are 2 hot teams running into each other. The Bucks average per game 115.5, 11th in the NBA points per game. They were up to 117.8 after the All-Star game. So they've got better offensively, which is kind of wild because Dame missed quite a bit of the season towards the end. And Giannis has carried the load, but Giannis has been, again, like I said, MVP caliber this year. Averaged a triple-double actually for the season. Opponent points per game, 113, 13th in the NBA. After the All-Star break, they were a little worse, 113.3, but it's not much as far as being noticeable. Pace 99.2, 14th in the NBA. So they're right in the middle of the pack as far as pace is concerned. Offensive rating 115.1 before the all season, 10th in the NBA. They were 117.9 post All-Star. And then defensive rating 112.7. Post All-Star break, they were 113.4 defensive rating. So they actually were not as good defensively, I don't think, post All-Star break. But again, I think it really depends on how you kind of break down their season because of Dame's injury. Net rating plus 2.4. They were 11th in the NBA, 4.5, plus 4.5 post All-Star break. So again, a really good team the Pacers are going to be facing, especially as of late. Leaders for the Bucks in 2024-2025, Giannis, 30.4 points per game. Assist, Dame, 7.1. I went ahead and anytime that Dame led a category, I added the next person just because we might not see Dame in this series. So Giannis had a 6.5 assist per game, which is crazy. Giannis, 11.9 rebounds per game. He's been freakish. I think I said he averaged a triple-double. I don't know where that got that from. But minutes, 36.1 for Dame. And field goal percentage, Giannis, 60% from the field. Taurean Prince lead them in three-point percentage at 43.9. Free throw percentage, Dame, 92%. The next best was Kevin Porter Jr. at 87.1%. Kevin Porter Jr. came over midway through the season. They did get him via trade, and Kyle Kuzma as well. This Bucks team reloaded. They got rid of Chris Middleton mid-season. Chris was a pacer killer, but he just could never stay healthy. He's not really stayed healthy with Washington either. He sits out a lot of games back-to-backs. Playoffs would have been rough on Chris. I mean, he's really just struggled knees, and just as he's gotten older, it's not something that he's been able to do consistently as play. So that's just a big concern, and they upgrade, I think, with Kevin Porter Jr. Now, that being said, there are some things that Kevin Porter Jr. does well, but there's also things that I thought Chris Middleton brought that were better than Kevin Porter Jr. I don't know. For some reason, Chris scares me more, and maybe that's just because he was a Pacer killer. We've not seen much of Kevin Porter Jr. against the Pacers, at least in this capacity with Giannis. And I know he's been great this season when he's come over to the Bucks, but yeah, Kevin Porter Jr., your second best free throw shooter, losing Dame at 92%. That's massive because he takes a lot of free throws, and you're missing a chunk of free throws right there that are, that's 5 to 6 points, 7 to 8 points per game most nights. So there's even times where he's been up. I was looking at playoff games last year. There's times, and again, this is without Giannis last year in the playoffs, but there were times where Dame spent most of his time at the free throw line, 12 to 14 free throws. So that's a big loss, obviously, for the Bucks, and we'll talk about that now. So, yeah, that's the look at the Bucks season recap. Again, their story's been Bobby Portis had missed I forgot to mention that he'd been suspended for, I think it was 25 games, and just got back, I think, within the last couple of weeks. And he's been really good since he's gotten back. There's still some rust, I think, with that. You missed 25 games, that's a lot, but that's also a good rest for Bobby Portis as a veteran he is, and he's not shooting a whole ton, but when he did last year in the playoffs, it seemed like he never missed. So maybe that's a benefit for the Bucks. Maybe that's not. We'll see how Bobby Portis is. Again, each season that passes, Bobby Portis is, I think, effective ability I kind of dwindles a little bit. So we'll see how they handle that, how the Pacers handle that. So yeah. Matchup numbers from this season. Let's get into some stats, what each team did against one another. So the Pacers actually just won one game of the 4 this year. You had the Bucks win 3. That was the first one was on 11 for the Bucks was on 11/22. So November 22nd, Bucks 129, Pacers 117. The Bucks 120, Pacers 112 on New Year's Eve. And then the next 2 games were in March, and both of these were on back-to-backs. The first one was traveling from Chicago to Milwaukee back-to-back, and that was a Pacers win. They were traveling home from Chicago. They were at home, and that was that Tyrese Halliburton 4-point play to win the game on March 11th. Pacers win that one 115, Bucks 114, and then you had the March 15th win by the Bucks 126-119. That was the second night of a back-to-back coming from Philadelphia. So that was a really rough game for the Pacers. And you've had guys missing those games. Halliburton had missed a game in that stretch. You had Nesmith who had missed game time during those stretches. So the Pacers really didn't play the Bucks at full strength at all this season. The Pacers really struggled up until January. So those first 2 games that they played, you were not getting the Pacers' best, not really the Bucks either. And you saw different lineups. That's the one thing about this playoff series that I think is just so hard because it's such a coin flip. And the fact that these teams look so much different than they did last season. There's so many things that are different about the way that these 2 teams are playing right now. And we're going to get into those things as we go from player to player, matchup to matchup that we're going to see throughout the series and some of the lineups that we'll see. But again, I just think there was so much that was different that I think it's hard to predict precisely what this is going to look like. When I'm sitting here thinking about other series in the NBA, because I was kind of doing a bracket that I'll share that I think towards the end I'll share on here, and then I'll also share it on Instagram and Twitter. I had a hard time picking what was going to happen. I think I know who's going to come out of this series, but I think it's thinking about how these games are going to line up it's so intriguing because I think there's just so many things that are going to change from game to game. And I'm excited to see what adjustments are made because, Doc Rivers is one that will typically stick with his veteran players. Rick Carlisle is somebody that will that we've seen in the playoffs stick to veteran players or players that he believes are the hot hand. And so I think that adds in a layer. This Giannis being healthy, but not having like a 1B guy or like a two kind of guy that he can go to. I think that impacts the series. I think the way that Tyrese has played, Pascal has kind of struggled in the second half of the season, but also I guess the coming onto the scene that has happened with Aaron Nesmith is very different. The bench has not been as good for Indiana, but also I think that the bench with the Bucks, while good shooters, I think can struggle at times just because they don't always hit their shots. So I don't know. It'll be very interesting. I don't know. I don't know if we can sit here and predict who's going to have a great series besides Giannis. And that kind of makes me. That's the one thing that kind of makes me a little bit worried about the Pacers is, heading into this series with the Bucks. The Bucks have owned them this year, but I think that was more of the results of what has happened with this roster, with Halliburton missing a game, with Neesmith not being around and playing. I also think that there was this you beat us in the playoffs and knocked us out, so there was that added fuel to the Bucks fire where the Pacers were more of like we're just trying to get right. We're just trying to get the better seed than you. We're not really making your game the one game that we're focusing on in the next couple of weeks. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of those dynamics of things have changed, players, rotations, all sorts of things. But let's get into it. Let's break that down. So what does this look like? What did the Bucks do as far as stats wise versus the Pacers? And then what did the Pacers do stat wise versus these Bucks this season? I think some of this can be pretty telling, but again, because things have changed so much with these rosters, at times I think it's a little bit difficult to kind of pinpoint how this series will go based on stats and who's going to perform. But if you look at it, field goals attempted, I think that's the first thing that I'll highlight. This is such a really big component to how the Pacers can beat teams in the playoffs, is because the Pacers will have more shots than most teams they play because of the ability to hang on to the ball, which is, if you look back at the first 25 games, they were one of the worst teams with live ball turnovers. They turned the ball over a ton in that first 25 games. And I'd even say after that, they weren't playing extremely well after that. They were playing better, but there were still a lot of issues with Tyrese Halliburton, not being good for the first 25 to 35 games. He was just not the Tyrese of old. It wasn't until later in the season, I would even say leading up to the All-Star break, enough to where it was like, man, if he had just played like this the rest of the way, he'd have been an All-Star. But then after All-Star break, again, he's been one of the best players in the NBA, I believe, and just the impact that he's had on this team. But again, looking at the Bucks against the Pacers, field goals attempted 87.5. If you look at the Pacers and you look at how many shots that they were able to take against the Milwaukee Bucks this season and the regular season, 91 shots per game in 4 games. That's almost that's almost three and a half possessions, or I guess field goals attempted than more than the Bucks. The Bucks shoot a lot of threes too. They do get a little bit three happy at times with their other players not named Giannis Antetokounmpo. I do think that's a huge advantage. Obviously, when you got more possessions, you're going to get more opportunities to score. But with how efficient the offense has been with the Pacers, that's where I think they have a huge advantage if they can continue to not turn the ball over. Turnovers and rebounding are what carry teams through the NBA playoffs. There's other aspects, obviously, that can impact that. If you have a player like a Giannis, a Jason Tatum, Jalen Brunson, guys that can kind of take over. But if you're looking at teams and their efficiency and the ability to wear teams down, the Pacers are deep and they shoot the ball well, and they don't give you chances to score on fast break, chances to score on line ball turnovers, chances to score on turnovers. That's just not something the Pacers have done this year, and that is a true testament to their maturity. I think people will often talk about like this team needs to mature more. I think they need to make. Sorry if you can hear the lawnmower, but if you listen to this team talk about their growth, I think that's something that maybe be in the back of their mind, but I don't think they really discuss it too much. Their ability to not turn the ball over is so vital in the playoffs. They will cause the other team to turn. They will make turnovers. Miles Turner will block shots. He will erase shot attempts. So even these shots that like it says that they've got a field goal attempted, like that attempt's got like zero chance sometimes with Miles Turner at the rim. Like that he impacts so much of the game. And we'll talk a little bit more about each player and how they can kind of impact this series. But I feel like there's not enough discussion around the fact that like there is with Tyrese Halliburton, there's this, how historic he has been, but there's just not been enough talk, I don't think, about what has made the Pacers so good in the second half. It's because they don't give the ball to the other team. Like they physically do not give the ball up. So you got to score in your possessions because you're not getting them from Pacer turnovers. I think one key thing that they can do too is if they can at least stay even in the rebound category this year. Last year, you could tell that the Pacers were going to lose based on the rebound. I think every game that they lost the rebounding battle. And that was like a crazy stat. Like there are times where you can not out rebound your opponent by a couple and still win the game, but they just get absolutely torn up on the glass. And they're still not a good rebounding team, one of the worst rebounding teams. But I think that's made up in the fact like the Bucks will turn it over, 4 or 5 times, maybe 6 times, 8 times, however much they do, and they struggle. The Pacers will never be that high. So it's like that alone, you're not giving up those possessions where they are giving up possessions. That kind of balances out that rebounding battle. So if you can stay close or even keel on the glass, I think you can stay close enough to a team like the Bucks because the Bucks just they don't run a ton. They play a lot of zone defense against the Pacers. They're not a team that's going to try to beat you on the fast break unless it's just Giannis running up and down the court. And when he gets downhill, that's when he's most dangerous. But I do feel like the Pacers can at least stay even because of the amount of turnovers that they get. They're never going to really out rebound a team. That being said, I've got an interesting stat because they've actually done a better job against the Bucks than most teams that they've played against. They actually rebound better against the Bucks, even though the Bucks are a good defensive rebounding team. They are a horrible offensive rebounding team. I think Indiana can take some advantage of that because you've got guys like Obi Toppin and Aaron Nesmith who do like to grab offensive rebounds more so than I think defensive rebounds at times. Ben Shepherd, if he does get some time, he will grab an offensive rebound or two. You got the idea that Jarris Walker might also get some run here in this series just to kind of combat the size of Giannis. And he's good for an offensive rebound usually. So you just add in all these things. And I think the Pacers, if you look at the trenches, if you look into the trenches, the things that aren't really going to knock down a stat sheet or like be the thing that people focus on the most, you will notice a turnover battle that the Pacers are winning. And I think you'll see where they are better defensively in the fact that like they're not allowing as many points. They're not as allowing as many possessions as they once were. I think they're a little bit better defensively as far as rebounding. They're not great by any stretch, but at least they're getting better. I think there's going to be a focus there. And it seems like too, whenever they lose games, they came back the next game and had a response. So if they lose games in this series, which I expect them to do, there seems to be an emphasis on just rebound the ball. Like that's where we lost. And that ended up being a lot of the case last year. So we'll see. But yeah, just kind of a long-winded route as I was talking about field goals attempted. But I feel like that's a really important stat to bring up is just because the Pacers on average have about 3 to 4 more shot attempts, possessions than the Bucks, which is so important in a series like this. You need as many possessions as possible. 3-point attempts, 35 for the Bucks. The Pacers are actually at 38, which is crazy. I would have thought the Pacers were lower than that just because I feel like they've just not shot the ball as well from 3, but the Pacers have actually been pretty decent as far as shooting them. They're not great. A 35% from three, where you can see the difference is the Bucks are 40%. So they're a good 3-point shooting team. But again, with that, that's very dangerous to play that game. Having played the game, I've played on teams that have been 3-point happy, and when it's going well, it can carry a team. When it's not going well, it's a disaster because you just lose constant possessions. 3-point shots are typically taken pretty quickly in the shot clock nowadays. So, I just see that as being like a key, I guess, limiting the Bucks 3-point attempts. Where you don't really have to limit them too much because they're not shooting a ton. They're just very efficient when they do shoot them. And you've got guys, which makes sense because a lot of their guys are more a role player than they are anything else. But we'll talk about that as we get into the matchups a little bit more. Something else I wanted to point out were the free throw percentages. So the Bucks against the Pacers on average shoot about 22 free throws a game. Giannis shoots a ton just because he gets fouled a ton. And he takes forever to shoot them, so the minutes per game just go extremely. I'm kidding, but he does take forever to shoot them. So you can keep yelling at him to shoot the ball because he takes every bit of the seconds that he has to get off a free throw. Free throws attempted 22 a game. They're 82% against the Pacers, and they're really not that good of a free throw shooting team. I think they're 75% on the season. They're one of the worst free throw shooting teams in the NBA and the Eastern Conference. But they've just shot it well against the Pacers, and sometimes that happens. More of a focus. The Pacers have only been a 71% free throw percentage team against the Bucks, but Indiana is actually a pretty decent free throw shooting team. Now they don't get as many attempts, I don't believe, as obviously some of these other superstars, like the ones that Giannis or Shea gets over in OKC, Harden gets with the Clippers. I just don't think we have anybody that gets that foul call that much. But the fact that they were even on free throw attempts and the Pacers didn't shoot as well from the free throw line against them, that kind of shocked me. And I think that's part of the reason why they struggled some against the Bucks, is just because their free throw percentage was not good against them. I feel like their 3-point percentage obviously was not good against them. I don't know. There were times where the Pacers, and I think this might have to do with some of the back-to-back, is they just weren't shooting the ball well against the Bucks. The Bucks are not a great defensive team. They're very, especially before Porter got there and Kuzma got there, because you could pretty much score on at will against Chris Middleton. Even when Dame's out there, he's not a good defender. So those guys are easier to score on. But I think with Kuzma and some of the younger talent that they've added, I just feel like they're better defensively just because they got rid of the pieces that are not as good. And that's where some people said, if Dame had played this, or if he still plays in this series, that's where the Pacers kind of can attack. And that's true. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton, I felt, had a good rest of the series against Milwaukee last year because Dame had to guard him. And that did not go well. He's just not a good defender. And when Dame had to guard him, and how active Tyrese can be at times, imagine running around chasing Tyrese as much as he did with Dame. And Dame played really well last playoffs, but he didn't have another option to kind of help him out. So, I mean, when you look at the matchup against the Pacers and Bucks, that's really the things that I noticed. I just, the Bucks had their number just because I think the circumstances in which they played the Pacers. I think that, give them a couple games in between when they had to play them in those two back-to-backs. They're better teams then. Pacers weren't, and as many teams are not as sharp back-to-back games. When you're missing Tyrese Halliburton or you're missing Aaron Nesmith, like that's a huge challenge against a team like the Bucks. So I really do. I don't think this season really tells the story of either of these teams, because I think the Bucks were a much better team in the second half, which is where they played the Pacers really tightly and almost had a 4-0 win against the Pacers. The Pacers had to get more wins in the Eastern Conference this year, because the Bucks could have had home court advantage had they taken care of business maybe a little earlier in the season, not lost that many games to start the season. The Pacers would be the 5th seed again. So, or not again, they would be the 5th seed. Playing on the road again against the Bucks would not have been fun. So, all right, let's get into, I guess, talking about some rotations and lineups, right? So a couple things to kind of caveat this. When you're looking at the rotations, I think with let's start with the Bucks because I think it's interesting. Kyle Kuzma is not a good defender, and they have there's a lineup with him. I think it's him when it was Dame, Giannis, and Brooke Lopez and Torian Prince. It was one of the worst defensive rotations that they had in the NBA. Kyle Kuzma can be a real disaster in the defense, which is why towards the end of games, especially at the end of the season when the Bucks have gone on this 8 game win streak, you saw Doc switch to a really odd rotation that you don't typically see in the NBA, where you put Giannis at the 5 because there were games that they were missing Bobby uh, Portis, sorry. I got there's too many ports on this team. But yeah, you put Giannis at the 5 and then you kind of fill it in there. But as the season has winded down and Bobby Portis has been back, it's been more of like a Giannis Portis. You had Porter Jr., Trent Jr., and AJ Green closing out games. Because Dame has missed games, they've been starting Ryan Rollins, but Ryan Rollins isn't one that finishes games typically. Portis has had times where he's struggled in the clutch. He's not. There were times last year too in the series where the game would get tight, and there would be times where Portis just does some things that you're like, "What are you doing?" Like he would take shots that maybe weren't the best shots because he thinks that I'm lighting it up. I might as well shoot it. I think he was kicked out of one game. He was given a technical. He's lost the ball a couple times in clutch moments from last series that I remember. Like he's not the best clutch player, so they've kind of, he's not been as trusted. So it kind of leads you up to Trent, and Gary Trent's a good ball player, and we'll talk about what I think he'll do this series because I think it'll be interesting. He's a good ball player, but he is not a number 2 kind of guy. So Giannis is kind of left in like that Paolo Banchero, and even then, like he's got at least Paolo's got Wagner. I just feel like Giannis at times has to you go full reliant on Giannis, and that's it. So if Giannis misses a shot or two, like that's it. Like the Pacers will win this series at the end of the games because Giannis is the only one they can truly trust in these clutch moments where, you have a shot at the end of the game and it's all going to be Giannis. Giannis is taking that shot. That's easier to defend. You put Pascal on it, you put some size on that with Jarris Walker or Pascal or Toppin. Like that becomes a more difficult, even Neesmith, like that becomes a difficult task to kind of figure out where do you go at the end of the games for the Bucks. But Kyle Kuzma, a good addition, I think, in the way that like I think he's more inclined to score, and I think he gives them at least a little bit more versatility defensively, even though he's not a great defender. More so than Middleton did. Middleton just became to a point where he's almost unplayable at the end of games just because you run right by him. Like it became so easy to get around him defensively. Now he used to torch the Pacers late in games. So you lose that clutch ability that I don't think Kuzma has. And Kuzma's not usually on the court at the end of the games because he's a liability defensively. So yeah, this is where I think Milwaukee has a true weakness is these guys have to step up. You've got guys like AJ Green, Kevin Porter Jr., Ryan Rollins, was a great 2-way player. They promote him with the contract. He gets off that 2-way contract, but he's young. Like he's not got any playoff experience. So this is going to be a unique circumstance for him. So you don't really expect to see him at the end of games, and that typically is avoided. They usually will put Porter in and they kind of run it with Giannis at point. I don't know, like they're that then limits you to a smaller lineup. Giannis is still a headache to deal with, but I think that it will create a little bit of an issue because when they do play that lineup, they've been very effective. One of the best lineups in the league to end the season was that AJ Green, Porter Jr., Trent Jr., Portis, and Giannis. Like that's a good lineup. But the Pacers will struggle a little bit, I think, defensively because those are good shooters that they're putting on the perimeter. But I do feel like the Pacers can weather that storm pretty well. That'd be a much harder storm to weather if you've got Dame out there too. It adds a whole different element when he's out there. But because he's going to be missing, they're going to rely so heavily on these veterans that, to be fair, they don't really have much playoff success. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see what Doc Rivers does, because the Bucks lineups are pretty much, they're going to be Brook Lopez to start, but Brook Lopez I don't think can play a full game anymore and be effective. Bobby Portis, I don't believe, can guard the likes of Pascal and Miles Turner. Like, he can guard one or the other. Like, it just doesn't work out where they're doing a lot of those switches where sometimes Giannis will be on Pascal, sometimes Giannis will be on Miles in those situations, and Bobby will have to guard Pascal. Like, Bobby struggled with Pascal last year, so it'll be interesting. Like, this is what I mean. Like, these games I think are going to be very wild, because I don't believe, I'm trying to think. The Celtics are really hard to match up with anyway for anybody, but I feel like the Bucks would be second next for the Pacers. Like, they're so difficult to match up with because they're so different stylistically than other teams. And with Giannis, like, Giannis is I don't know anybody that guards Giannis very well. So yeah, that's where it becomes really hard. It's like prime LeBron. Nobody guards prime LeBron. Like, you just kind of hope the others didn't go off, like Ray Allen and Chris. So I think got the same kind of thing, but these players are nowhere close to that kind of talent. You're talking about a huge drop off from Giannis to, I'd say their second best player right now is Kevin Porter Jr. So yeah, let's talk about it. Rick Carlisle, as far as rotations are concerned, you're talking a whole lot about limiting, I think, the rotation some. Now, one thing that I do want to bring up, because last year it was very interesting how Rick handled this. So Rick, I think, tried to use a regular season rotation of 10 last season, and it didn't go well. He used Isaiah Jackson, Obi Toppin last year. You had TJ McConnell, Ben Shepherd. I'm missing somebody. Maybe it was just 9. I'm missing someone. I don't remember who else it would have been. I think Doug McDermott. So he tried to use 10, and that didn't go well, especially the first game. Second game, Doug played a little bit too, kind of stretch out that defense. And they were 9-10. It wasn't until later in the series that they started to go to kind of that 3 men off the bench rotation, so 8 players. And I think that works. That just works in the playoffs. The Pacers' strength is their depth. I think playing 9 players could happen if Jarris Walker is trusted enough. But we've seen in the past, and I've seen a lot of the Pacers people talking about this media, where they've been talking about Jarris Walker and the impact he can have on the series. My thing is if Rick trust him enough yet. While he did play at the end of the season, that was more to maybe Ben Shepherd's struggles, and then Ben Shepherd had the toe injury, which we've not really heard if Ben will be available to start the series. I know Rick's past. I don't feel like this first game is where he's really going to be tempted to try. He's either going to be tempted to try it and he tries a longer rotation, or he's going to go into this idea of like, I have 3 guys I trust: Obi Toppin, TJ McConnell, and Benedict Mathurin. And those are the 3 guys we're going to stick with. And then maybe towards the end of the second or first half, you see maybe Jarris or Ben for a little bit. Or we get a different kind of Rick where he's like, you know what? Strength is our depth, or the strength is our depth. And he does what he did last year to start the series, and he plays that 9 to 10 man rotation, which I don't think works very well in the playoffs, but that's typically what Rick has done in the past, where he's tried what had worked for them in the regular season. And then when that doesn't work, he adjusts. I just don't know if you have that ability. Now, that being said, on the road, this would be, I think, a tough game to try to get Jarris Walker into his first playoff experience, meaningful playoff minutes against a Bucks team that have veteran players. Like, a lot of these guys are veteran guys that are in their starting lineup. But that being said, I think being at home could have a better feel for Jarris, a young player at home in the playoffs with the crowd behind him is going, because once he makes one good play, that confidence is going to go through the roof. I think there's been times where I've watched Jarris this year where confidence is everything, and it usually is with the young player. But like you can physically see Jarris Walker get tentative. Like there's Ben Shepherd didn't really have times where he gets like real tentative, but like with Jarris, you notice it. Like he gets really kind of like where he's almost like he's tiptoeing around and trying to figure out what am I doing out here. Whereas Ben at least would go full force, and if he did something wrong, he just did something wrong. Jarris was very calculated, and I think that's where he starts to overthink things, and then that's when you see those turnovers where he's trying to make the really good pass, and he's a really good passer when he's on, but when he's not, he tends to make really bad decisions because he's a young player and he just doesn't have that confidence built. I think the stretch of the last 10 to 12 games that he's played in, I think that helps tremendously in confidence. He's a really good player, and he's going to be a really good player, but I just don't know if Rick trusts him yet. I think we'll see him in a little short burst to see how he does, and that'll be the tell of what Jarris Walker's playoff life will be for the next year or so. So nothing against Jarris, but I just feel a little bit different, I think, than other people do, where they're like, you got to play Jarris. I'm like, you do. I think you do, but I also think Rick, thinking as Rick does, I just don't know if Jarris is going to get a ton of run in this first playoffs. Run that he's actually playing meaningful minutes. Like last year, he was just that guy that was on the bench in case they had to throw him out there for some reason. This year, he's breaking into the rotation. Next year, I think that's when you see more and more minutes from Jarris Walker. Obviously, they're way more meaningful, where he's playing a huge piece, or is a huge piece to the rotation. I just don't know if there's enough time where they feel confident yet. Jarris, we'll see. I could be wrong. He could go out there and Jarris is the third one off the bench or fourth one off the bench. So we'll see. You do have to shorten that rotation in the playoffs. He gives you size. Like that's a huge thing with Jarris Walker. But I just don't know. Looking how Rick does with the rotations, obviously you've got the starting five with Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, Pascal Siakam, and Miles Turner. You're going to see a lot of, I believe, Pascal and Obi at the five. I think they'll play a lot more small ball. I don't think you'll actually see Thomas Bryant a whole bunch unless there's some foul trouble with Miles Turner. I don't think you see Bradley at all. No Furphy, no Quentin Jackson, unless TJ gets hurt or he's, not producing, and it's just so noticeable that they have to yank TJ. But I don't see that happening. TJ seems to elevate his game in the playoffs, even when he struggled at times this season. I feel pretty confident in TJ. But yeah, that rotation. I mean, one of the best ones that I think that they had, obviously, is ones that include Aaron Nesmith. So when you're talking about ending the game, it's typically Halliburton, Siakam, Turner, Nembhard, and Nesmith. Even if Mathurin's on a heater, you don't typically see Mathurin at the end of the game. Unless it's you need 3-pointers, maybe, then you take out Nembhard and you put Tyrese, Mathurin, and Nesmith out there if you need some threes. That's probably the only time you see those two ever together is Mathurin and Nesmith. They don't typically play together. But the best defensive-minded units are ones that include Aaron Nesmith, and especially against Milwaukee, he's got a plus 12.4 rating with defensive-minded units with Nesmith. That's just incredible. When Nesmith's in it, he changes the game that much compared to Mathurin. So it's a lot of that. And this was the way with, like, when Benedict Mathurin and Nesmith are often compared, it's because you look at Mathurin's plus minus, and Mathurin's are usually minus out of the plus minus because he's not good defensively. But then you've got Nesmith, who was typically not offensive minded. He was much more defensive minded. But this second half of the season, Aaron Nesmith's been their second best offensive player because Pascal's not been as good. So Aaron Nesmith is pretty much a solid lock for that the final lineup to run out there at the end of the game, final rotation. I just feel like Aaron Nesmith provides so much. He's very smart. He rebounds very well. He just does a lot of things right that you really like. And that's not saying that Mathurin doesn't. I'm just saying Mathurin, he doesn't defend off ball very well. He's actually gotten better defensively, I think, on ball, which I think he could be an interesting person if for some reason he had to guard Giannis every once in a while, like, 3 or 4 possessions. I think Mathurin can do it if because Giannis is much more ball dominant right now. He doesn't really post up people. Um, and he might try to post up Mathurin a couple of times, obviously, but again, there's no stopping him. So you're just throwing different defensive things at Giannis and hoping it sticks. Lineups, again, like I said, Pacers are going to line up like this to start the game. Miles Turner at center, forward of Pascal Siakam. The second forward and small forward is going to be Aaron Nesmith. You got guards Andrew Nembhard and Tyrese Halliburton. Bench players that'll be used in this series will be TJ McConnell, Obi Toppin, Ben Mathurin, and then a mix of Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd, and maybe Thomas Bryant if there are foul issues. I just don't see Thomas Bryant getting that many meaningful minutes in these series, maybe to give Miles a break at the end of a half, or if Miles has 2 or 3 fouls towards the end of the half, you might see like them try to go to Thomas Bryant to kind of lock up Brook Lopez a little bit. But I mean, Brook Lopez isn't really going to be a force down low. So I actually think you see more of that small ball 5 that was so successful where they've got, because Pascal does a really good job as far as defending guys not named Giannis Antetokounmpo. But I think Ben Mathurin, Obi Toppin can defend Brook Lopez just fine for a couple minutes. So Brook's not really what he used to be. He does shoot really well, but that's about it that he does. He sets good picks too. Bucks lineup. Ryan Rollins is going to start. Then you've got guard Taurean Prince. Then you have forward Kyle Kuzma, forward Giannis Antetokounmpo, and then Brook Lopez at center. Bench Gary Trent Jr., Kevin Porter Jr., Bobby Portis, AJ Green, and that'll pretty much wrap them up because I don't think Pat will play. Pat shot really well. I think he scored like 40 points in that last game. So against Detroit, that didn't matter. But yeah, I think AJ Green kind of where the buck stops there. No pun intended. So kind of looking at matchups, you'll see Miles Turner on Brook Lopez to start the game. Giannis and Pascal will guard each other typically. You'll have Kyle Kuzma and Aaron Nesmith guarding one another. And then Andrew Nembhard and Taurean Prince. And then Tyrese and Ryan Rollins as far as the Bucks will line up. I could actually see, though, the Bucks. I could see the Bucks, not the Bucks. I could see the Pacers, switching it every once in a while where you got Pascal Siakam, where he might, because they do a lot of 4 and 5 switches. 4 and 5 switches. Pascal Siakam will sometimes end up on Brook, where Miles will accidentally, but will get picked off and have to guard Giannis a couple times. But when they look back, Caitlin Cooper did a podcast and a breakdown of like who guards Giannis typically. I think Pascal Siakam, I think it was the most volume that a person guarded another person this season. Pascal Siakam basically never leaves Giannis Antetokounmpo. When Giannis is in, Pascal is there. When Giannis is out, Pascal is not there. A lot of minutes spent. I think it's like 70% that Pascal spends on Giannis. And then you've got the random Aaron Nesmith minutes on Giannis. Sometimes Miles Turner will get to him, or they'll even sometimes use Obi Toppin, but that's pretty rare. They just are going to try to throw some things at him to kind of throw him off. But ultimately, you're going to see a lot of Pascal and Giannis, I think, on one another. The Pacers might even try a couple times with Jarris and Giannis, just because Jarris is a lengthier, stronger, defensive-minded player, more so than he's bigger than Aaron. I don't know if he's quite as strong yet, but he will be. Aaron Nesmith's strong. So I think that's why he guards Giannis. And whenever Giannis gets Aaron Nesmith, Aaron typically, plays a couple of possessions. Giannis posts him up a couple of times, hits a couple of mid-rangers like he always does, and then that's when they switch it off. Sometimes he has some success of stripping Giannis. Ben Mathurin actually guarded him his sophomore year, where Caitlin Cooper was showing like he stripped him a couple of times. So that might be something they play around with sometimes when should Ben Mathurin be out there. But ultimately, the game plan is to get Giannis running downhill at usually like a Miles Turner, trying to get into Miles or Pascal or one of the guards to try to come over and help so he can pass. The one thing that's different about Giannis is he keeps getting better and better at distributing the basketball. And that's where it can be really dangerous for the Pacers is if he's distributing and the guys around him are hitting those shots. Gary Trent has been a thorn for the Pacers, but he typically has been the only one. Kyle Kuzma every once in a while, but like not noticeably. Kyle, I think in moments that matter, Kyle won't be out there anyway. But he's not really somebody I'm too worried about because I think when you have the ability to move like a Nemhard or a Neesmith onto Kyle Kuzma to kind of eliminate him too, that's going to cause a problem because I think you do see some mixture of Nemhard and Neesmith on Kyle Kuzma to kind of mix up that matchup. Torian Prince is a good 3-point shooter, but it's not like he's taking a huge portion of those shots. And then Kevin Porter Jr. is the one that the Pacers are really going to have to worry about because while Ryan Rollins will start, it looks like looking at the box score, he plays about 13 to 15 to maybe 18 minutes, depending per game. And then most of the game is held down by Kevin Porter Jr. So Kevin Porter is more of like a fifth starter that doesn't start. So you'll notice that Kevin Porter plays a ton, and Gary Trent. So those two guys, when they're in, I'd imagine that you're going to see Nemhard on Kevin Porter, and then you're going to see Aaron Neesmith, guard Kyle Kuzma, Torian Prince, Gary Trent, depending on who's on the floor. Even like an AJ Green, like Nemhard's always going to be on Porter when he's out there. And then I think if Porter's not out there and Torian's not out there and say maybe Gary Trent's out there, then you'll see Nemhard on that. But I don't think you see very many moments when Nemhard isn't on like a Kevin Porter or a Gary Trent Jr. So we'll see. Neesmith is just as good a defender. I think he doesn't get the praise as much as Nemhard does, but I think Neesmith is up there in that same kind of echelon where he can be a lockdown defender. But I think with Aaron, you want more of his legs for shooting the ball down at the other end, and the way that he's playing offensively, you want his legs to be healthier. So you're not going to see a whole lot of what you saw with like Brunson last year, where Aaron Neesmith was spending more time on Brunson just because he gave Brunson more of a headache than Nemhard typically did, because Nemhard's a little smaller. Well, not a little. He's very small compared to Aaron Neesmith. So, this is, I think, a good series for the Pacers in the fact that like those guards are. Like Kyle Kuzma's bigger, but he's not going to give you a lot of problems down low. Like it's not like a Jaylen Brown. Like he's not Jaylen Brown's type where Jaylen Brown is like knock you out, kind of roll you over, run you over kind of person. Even like a Holiday or even Derek White's good at getting to the rim and stuff like that. Like the Celtics always gave the Pacers a problem, and anybody with bigger wings gives the Pacers problems. This team doesn't really have that. While they might have a little bit of a bigger guard, they're not really guys that take advantage of that. There are a lot of 3-point shooters on this team. And I think that's where you got to worry about them. Series X factors. With the Pacers, I'm going to go. So there's two people that I think could really change the game here. And two guys that I think could really impact what's going on the floor with the Pacers. Miles Turner is one of them. And I say this because Brook Lopez cannot defend Miles Turner. I don't think either in the 3-point area nor going to the basket. I just don't think Brook Lopez is that good defensively anymore. He was a top defensive player in his prime, but I think as he's gotten older, he's gotten slower. I think Miles can actually beat him off the dribble is what I mean. Miles is never going to post people up, but I think Miles actually can beat him off the dribble pretty well. Which last year there were times where he'd get to the rim on the dribble. You'd see Miles take off. So I think there's a lot of that where it's that fake handoff up at the top of the key where he's trying to, pick that and fade off that pick to hit a three. I think there's times where Brook Lopez will come flying out at him, and Brook Lopez does not want to guard the perimeter. I just think there's a lot of times where you can take advantage of how slow Brook Lopez is. And I think Miles Turner can really change this series if he's hitting his shots. He's such a good 3-point shooter that you're pretty confident in the fact that if he takes 4 or 5 3-point shots, he's going to hit half of them. All he needs is 2 or 3 of them. That's really all we need from Miles to really change the dynamic of how they guard the pick and roll. Because if Miles Turner's fading off that pick and Tyrese is getting around, like a Ryan Rollins or a Torian Prince or even Kevin Porter Jr., like when they're trying to defend which they that's one thing, they will not defend Tyrese very well. But I think when you think about this team, with the Pacers. I think the biggest thing you can do is challenge their ability to move, because I think the Pacers are more athletic in every instance, up and down. Tyrese is more athletic than like a Ryan Rollins or a Torian Prince or Kyle Kuzma. Andrew Nimhard, same thing, more athletic, more quick than anything. Aaron Nesmith can get to the bucket. He's quick. And I think better at getting the rim than the other three too. And Kevin Porter might be the one that can keep up with them the best, but he can't guard all three of them. Um, I think the Pacers at point of attack, they really need Miles Turner to be that guy, because Pascal is going to get his. Tyrese, I think, is going to be much better in the playoffs this year about getting his own, but also finding people. I think you see a whole different Tyrese this season in this playoff series. Um, but I mean, X Factor, Miles Turner, and then the other one's Ben Mathurin. Like I said, a coin flip. Ben Mathurin can absolutely change a game, and this is what we've been really excited about, right? We've been excited about seeing Ben in a playoff series because in the regular season, there becomes times where that offense gets stagnant, and then he kind of does his own thing, and there's not really like high stakes in a lot of the regular season, especially coming off the bench like Ben has. Ben thrives, and you've seen this. Ben thrives in matchups where they think that they can take advantage of him, matchups that like when he gets angry, like it's like the Hulk. When he gets mad, he's a whole different guy. Like he's a silent killer. Like there's not the Pacers don't really have that. Like Tyrese can turn that on sometimes. Pascal sometimes. Miles sometimes. Aaron sometimes. And you can go on and on. Drew sometimes. TJ sometimes. Ben Mathurin is constantly on kill mode. Like I always feel like he takes everything personally, and I love that about him because I think playoffs is where he's really going to be effective. They're going to give him the ball and they're going to say, "We're going to get out of your way." And I hope that they run more of that pick and roll stuff for him because I think he can do so many things, especially with the way that he's now been able to pass the ball. Go back to a couple of these series where he's been able to pass the ball on that Nimhart three that they used to beat, I think it was Dallas. He makes an impossible pass, kind of like over his head, didn't look into Pascal Siakam. Pascal Siakam swings it over to Andrew Nemhard, and Nemhard hits that three to win. Ben does so many good things now where, again, he will have some turnovers, but not a ton. But he can flat out take over games, and he can get to the free throw line. Free throws in the playoffs, they matter a ton. There's a tremendous amount of emphasis on getting to the line in the playoffs. If you look at playoff series where teams are winning or losing, typically what the experts will say is how are they doing on the free throw line? Are they getting to the line? That'll win you games. In the playoffs, get those points as many as you can. I think that's where Ben can help them because the Pacers typically, besides Pascal, some Tyrese, they don't really get to the line a whole lot. And I think that Ben can do that where he can get to the line 8 to 10 times a game. It just he's got that ability that like a Harden does or Shea does. Like he gets to the rack and he gets guys off balance because he's so strong, he's so quick, but he also like he sells it really well. Like he looks like he gets drilled in a lot of instances, which he does get hit. There is contact, but but for some reason he's like that bouncy explosive where he just feels like he gets crushed each time that he gets hit. So it makes it look more like like and they'll call it. So I just feel like there's an ability there where Ben can really change this game. And when the offense gets stagnant, which it will in the playoffs, it always does, especially with this Bucks team, because this Bucks team loves to play a zone, and we'll talk about that in our next segment. But the Bucks team loves to break down the Pacers' pace by playing a lot of zone. They played against the zone the most in the Eastern Conference this year. The Pacers did. So the Pacers just really struggled for a very long time against the zone. They finally put in a new play. And Caitlin Clark, if you haven't, or not Caitlin Clark, Caitlin Cooper, if you haven't looked at her video, go check out her video because she does a really good job of identifying things with film. Like she's great at breaking down film. She's very intelligent in the way that she presents the game. And she broke it down where they got a new play where it's more of like just constant motion, where it's just this motion of guys cutting baseline, going to the middle around the 3-point or the free throw line and getting that ball into the middle, breaking that zone. But I feel like Benedict can actually do that. He can get into the middle of those zones. He can break down those zones by shooting it really well. But he's also one of those guys that's so explosive that he's kind of like Tyrese, where Tyrese has always kind of been like I think when we've played zones, fans have been like, let's get Tyrese the ball and have him break it down. But he's just not strong enough, I don't think, to get like where he needs to get. And they oftentimes double team Tyrese out of his zone. Benedict doesn't really get that attention, where I think there's times where they set these screens to kind of get these screens kind of trapped in, where you got the two top players getting screened out by screens that are basically keeping them from getting out to the arc. So you'll have a guy. So for instance, like if Tyrese is at the top left hand side and you've got Siakam there at the elbow or like right at the top of the 3-point line screening, and then Aaron Nemhart or Andrew Nemhart or Aaron Neesmith are behind them, you screen them in, and then you pass that ball over, and they can't get out to him because Pascal's standing there to screen them. Yeah, I just feel like Benedict can do that and break down a defender at the top of a zone. I feel like he can penetrate a zone because you're trying to get into the gaps. That's where you need to get into a zone. You need to get into the baseline. You need to get overloaded on one side to make sure that defense is trying to get over to them and then swing the ball quickly to the other to try to balance that zone, get as many guys flooded into an area that you can offensively, and it'll break down the defense. Another thing you have to do well in a zone is you have to hit shots. You've got to hit shots to break a zone. That's the thing I think the Pacers really struggle with, is guys don't hit their shots to break them out of that. If you hit 2 or 3 threes, they're coming right out of that zone. If you hit 2 mid-range shots on the baseline because they haven't really figured out how to get to that baseline because they've been, there's times where they overcommit to a guard's passing lane or something like that. If you can get to that baseline and you can make those middies like Andrew Nemhard does, if you can get Aaron Neesmith to hit a couple corner threes like he does, if you can get Benedict Mathurin to kind of get into those zones by penetrating the gaps like he does, you can really break down this Bucks defense because they're not great defensively. The zones are just used to slow them down, but I think it's more the Pacers just don't understand how to break down zones very well. A lot of that is to do with the fact that they just don't have the sharp shooters that they need to knock them out of it. If you got 2 sharp shooters, they won't even consider a zone. They're like, yeah, we're not doing zone because it's easy points for them. But the Pacers have Aaron Neesmith, and then they double team Tyrese, and Miles kind of plays like this awkward middle of the zone, can kind of come up and set picks, but picks don't typically work too much in zones depending on what kind of picks you're setting. So especially ball on screens, like those just aren't. I just don't like screens on on the ball when you're playing a zone. I don't ever understand why teams did that, unless you got a really quick guard that can come out of that. But they usually double team that, or they go under the screen, and you're just playing the game of wasting 10 seconds at the top of the key trying to get around zones, dribbling. So you don't dribble out of a zone, you pass out of a zone. So yeah, that's what the Bucks will do, and I think Benedict can be that game changer. Benedict can do things that a lot of these guys can't on the Pacer roster. Filling up the score sheet is one of them, and he can do it quickly. The Bucks X factors. Everyone not name Giannis. I know that's a cheap one to show. They're like, pick a player. I was like, I really couldn't, because there's a couple things, right? Brook Lopez is I think a liability defensively. Even though he's been a good defensive player in the post, the Pacers present obstacles because they've got 2 guys that can shoot on the outside from their bigs, from Pascal to Miles. I think another thing is Tyrese is very good at the pick and roll with Miles Turner, and Brook Lopez is not that great at defending the screen when Tyrese can explode off of that screen, because Miles can do all sorts of things. Miles can fade. Miles can go to the rack. Miles can go get the ball and swing it elsewhere as he's dribbling it down off the screen. Like, there's so many things that Miles can do that causes Brook Lopez such a headache. And then if he gets switched over on Pascal can get right by him. So there's so many things I think that Brook Lopez can't do. He cannot guard the perimeter, and I think that's one thing that Miles can do, is he controls the perimeter very well on the offensive side, where even when Miles isn't shooting the 3, Miles will bring Brook Lopez out because he cannot defend the rim because Miles is standing at the 3-point line. There's so many issues with that, and I think that's where the Pacers hold an advantage. So Brook Lopez is very important. Brook Lopez has to hit shots, because defensively, I think he's going to be a disaster for them, because I just don't think he can do much to really infiltrate that Pacers offense. Like, I just don't think there's anything he does that changes their offense at all. if you go down the line, right, Ryan Rollins, he's a young point guard who's not had any experience in this kind of environment. It is very tough to go into, I'm about called a Baker's Life, Gainbridge. Um, it's one of the best places to play. They hold an incredible record at home. The Pacers do, which is why it's so important that the Pacers got home court advantage because of how good they've been on the or at home this season. And I think that it causes such an issue. Um, they're 29-11 at home, so they've got the second most wins at Eastern Conference. Sorry, I was looking at my notes. But Ryan Rollins playing on the road as a young player, that usually is a difficult ask because if you remember back, first playoff appearances by certain players, but aside from the stars, because Ryan Rollins is not a star. He's a good player, but he's not a star. Those don't usually go well. There's a lot of learning you have to do. And for a point guard, that is tough. Like I know Giannis is going to handle a lot of the ball, but like giving that much responsibility to a kid that's got hardly any experience at all is just really tough, even though he's had a good season, Ryan Rollins. So that's tough for him. Torian Prince, he's not somebody that's really going to change a game too much. He will hit a couple threes, but he's not like one of those 3-point shooters that you're like, can you please just stop shooting the basketball? We have one there. We'll get there. Kyle Kuzma can change a game in the way that he scores. He's not going to defend, and I think that's where he's going to become a liability. But like Kyle Kuzma isn't going for 30 points a game. Like that's just not his game. Maybe there's times where he struggles to score 20, depending on how focused the Pacers are defensively. There's times where Kyle Kuzma can be ineffective. And if he's not going offensively, he's coming out because he's not good defensively. So he will cause problems defensively because he's just not going to. He's going to be somebody you can attack. Brook Lopez, we already talked about. Gary Trent Jr. This is the one I have circled as the most problematic for me. While Kevin Porter Jr. is that guy you're going to worry about, besides Giannis, as far as like a second option, Gary Trent has been an absolute thorn in the Pacers side. He hits threes all the time. He goes for over 20 quite a bit against the Pacers. Like he is a problem for the Pacers. He just hits shots. He's the one that I think the Pacers really got to focus on not getting beat by. It sounds crazy, but you got to limit him. You cannot let him get to where it's like he's hitting 5 threes in one game. Like kind of like a DiVincenzo. That's kind of who he reminds me of sometimes, is like, and the ability to like change the game offensively. He can do things that you're like, he can be a nuisance on the offensive end. Defensively, he's okay, but like he's not going to do anything that changes the game defensively like a Pat Bev did. Another thing I think that the Bucks are missing that guy. They don't have anybody to really defend except Giannis, but Giannis isn't going to spend his time on Tyrese Halliburton or Aaron Nesmith, or he's going to guard certain guys, but he's not going to be focused on just one guy shutting him down because he's got to be effective on the offensive end. So he's not going to burn his energy. So you don't really have to worry about Giannis too much defensively because they don't have anybody else that plays really, really good defense. Kevin Porter Jr., good defensively, again, not great, is beatable. He's somebody that I think he's 50-40 kind of guy. 50%, 40% 3-point, 50% from the field. He's shot it really well. And I think from the line, he's 87%. So he's like a solid offensive player right now. That being said, in his career, he has not always been that. He has not always been a 20-point guy. He's really kind of struggled to get to that 15 mark. I think with a focus on him, Aaron and Andrew will get the assignment to guard him at times, Andrew being the dominant one defensively. I don't know if he's ever seen that kind of focus on himself. Like, yes, I know that the best defenders probably are guarding him towards the end of that run in the season, in the regular season. But you also had Dame before that. And then Kevin's kind of come on lately, and he's been good this season since the trade deadline. But you also had Dame then. I don't know if he's ever been the second focus of this offense, like tremendous focus, like a playoff focus kind of thing, where like Giannis is going to get his. Giannis will probably average 35 to 40 points a game in this series. It'll be nuts. And then you'll get really mad because Giannis is really good. There's no stopping him. There's nothing they can do about it. He's going to do it. The thing I think you've got to slow down is these two options, right? Gary, Trent, and Kevin. I think those two are important. Kyle Kuzma, I think too, like to an extent. I just don't have confidence that he's going to propel them forward. He can get buckets, but he's not like, I don't know. Like I've got more for some reason. Gary Trent scares me more than Kyle Kuzma. But Kevin Porter can be that guy, right? He can be that second guy. So I think, at least right now, I think Nemhard will focus more there. And I think when you've seen Nemhard focus on that as a game plan, where they don't really need Nemhard's offense too much, Nemhard can really crack down on some of these guys. I think Kevin Porter, and they're about the same size. They're both 6'4". Kevin Porter has about 10 pounds on, 14 pounds on Andrew, but Andrew's very strong too. Kevin's pretty strong. So I think it'll be a good matchup. I think there are moments where Kevin will have 20-point games, but I do think that the Pacers can kind of limit him some. That will be key to this series. If they can limit him some, I don't think the Bucks have much of a shot, honestly. But that's saying that they will, and that these other guys won't. Like Gary Trent won't go for 20 each game, which is possible because he gets hot. Let's see. Anything else? Keys for the team. All right. So I want to go for keys for each team. I'm going to give 3 each. This episode probably about 2 hours, so I do apologize if it's too long, but there's just so much to say in these playoff previews. Keys for each team. Pacers, fast starts at home, fourth for a reason. There was a reason why they went out and got the number 4 spot. It was because they did not want to play those first games in, I guess in Milwaukee in this case, because last year, like I think they said they never won a first game. Game 1 was never won by the Pacers, I believe, in that first round. Which, yeah, that sounds right. Because they definitely lost the Bucks. They lost the Knicks and Boston. So they did not win a game on the road to start. So now they've got that flipped. They are 29-11 at home this year. They've historically always been a very tough team to beat at Gainbridge. They've gone 12-1, and I think 12-1 or 13-1 in their last 13 home games. They've only lost one game. It was that Lakers game. They are so difficult to beat at home. And I think it's because the crowd, the fans, you guys are awesome. I think you guys provide an energy to some of these players that are incredible. So I'm excited to see that. So fast starts at home. They've been awful for the last month starting games, like horrible. They go cold. You can't afford to do that in the playoffs. You got to get going right away. The thing I would be focused on right now as a Pacer player, if I'm Pascal or Miles or even Aaron and Andrew, Rick, you got to get Tyrese going early. Like, get him a bucket early. Get him going. Because, there's a stat out there floating around on X. I couldn't find it, in enough time. But basically, when Tyrese scores early within, I think it's the first couple of minutes, or he hits his first bucket, he averages 18, 19 points a game. If he misses his first bucket or doesn't score in the first 2 minutes, he averages 8 to 10 points. It's a crazy stat, how engaged he becomes once he hits a shot. That being said, this is on Tyrese. Tyrese has got to get more implemented in the offense. I think this is a big key for the Pacers going forward too, is I would say overarching theme and a theme that I think, or a thing that the Pacers must do every game, is get Tyrese involved early in the offense. And I mean scoring, not passing the ball. I mean, there are times where that gets him going, but hit a shot, get a layup, hit a 3, hit a mid jumper. He's very good in the mid range right now. Get him something, right? Get him going to the rack, get him fouled, let him see the ball go in. I think you got to set up a play, the first couple of plays, where it's one of those plays where you're like, this is surefire to get him a good shot. Because they have those abilities, and there's not anybody out there that's going to guard him. They're not. See, this is where I think in this series, Taurean Prince will try it, but I don't think he'll be successful. They try to get Tyrese. They try to pick him up full court or half court. They try to get in his face and not allow him the ball. I don't think the Bucks have a player like that can do that, at least for a long period of time. So I don't think that's the problem. Whereas, if they were facing a Boston or Cleveland, I think they have players that they can implement to put them defensively in Tyrese's grill. I don't think the Bucks really have that, unless they're going to put Giannis on Tyrese, which I doubt they will do, because I'm not sure that Taurean Prince and them can guard Pascal. So I think you might see a moment or two where Giannis jumps onto Tyrese. Maybe it's early, but I really don't feel like they're going to try to wear down Giannis either, because Tyrese would just run him around. So that's an interesting dynamic. But again, the long story short, get Tyrese going, but you got to get going fast. And part of that is because Tyrese takes a long time to get going if he's not involved early. So that's my thing. If you start fast at home, it's because Tyrese is involved. Get him involved. Get him going fast. So number 2, zone busters. Back in January, the Bucks went into zone 23 times against the Pacers. They were oftentimes the most zone team in the Eastern Conference throughout the season. The Indiana Pacers wasn't until later in the year, I would say, around that March time where they faced the Bucks, where the Bucks kept throwing a zone at them, and finally it looked like the Pacers were figuring out how to break that down. But breaking down a zone in the NBA is oftentimes linked directly to their maturity. So you got to figure out a way to break it down. TJ McConnell has to hit those mid-range shots, because if he's hitting those mid-range shots, the bench unit breaks the zone. If Tyrese and Aaron and them are breaking down that zone and getting good open looks and hitting their threes, they're going to break down the zone. They're going to let Andrew Nembhard shoot the ball. Like, that'll be the person they're letting shoot the ball out of those zones. Andrew's got to hit those shots. Or take it to the rim, or take it to that mid-range where he's comfortable. He can get to those spots in those zones. He's just got to find ways to do that. Andrew Nembhard is a big key as far as those zone busters, and TJ McConnell. Obi Toppin and the bench unit. The bench has been awful. There's no other way to put it. They've not been great. Obi Toppin's been excellent, but besides that, it's been a really hard watch. Like, TJ McConnell has been really hard to watch this season. That being said, TJ has another level, and TJ can get back there. He's one of the best. He has one of the best field goal percentages in those shots that he takes around the rim. It's incredible, but he just hadn't had it lately. And it might be legs, it might be tired, but again, having a week off should help. And in the playoffs, TJ is one of those guys that rises to the occasion. I don't have any lack of confidence in him. I'm probably more confident he'll play like he did last year in the playoffs than he did for like most of the season this season. I think the bench will be better if they can get Benedict Mathurin involved more. I think it'll be tough because Ben will be playing more minutes with Tyrese. Tyrese and Ben have been trying to figure out how does that work together. Even Benedict and Pascal, how does that work together? Those are very ball dominant people. That being said, I think they've started to really unlock that by getting the ball quicker to Benedict and letting Tyrese kind of float off of the ball and kind of in between in those corners. I think we could get something there where we get more Mathurin and Pascal pick and roll, Mathurin and Pascal, pick and fades kind of thing, and getting Tyrese set up in a corner somewhere and getting the ball moving more, where you get Tyrese the ball by a happenstance of like Mathurin gets picked, Pascal rolls, Pascal gets the ball, Pascal can hit the mid range or dump it out to Tyrese. Like, I feel like there's something there that could work. I don't know, but it just seems like the bench unit needs to be more cohesive with some of the starters. Obi Toppin playing the 5 has unlocked a different level for this Pacer team because of how good Obi Toppin's been shooting the basketball. If Obi Toppin's shooting the basketball like he did at the end of the season, this team can be an absolute juggernaut because of how good his scoring has been. And Obi Toppin's played a lot better defensively. I want to give him credit where credit is due. The Bucks, getting others involved early. Without Dame, those other pieces are going to have to pick up the slack. Gary Trent Jr. and Kevin Porter Jr. are the keys to what the Bucks are going to be able to unlock in this series. I don't think Kyle Kuzma will do it, and I could be wrong, but I just don't have confidence where he's going to be the one that it changes the game enough. The other two, I do believe, could change the game enough, especially if Gary Trent gets hot. There's a good chance he might miss 5 or 6, but there's also a good chance he hits every shot and you're annoyed with him by the end of the season. Contain the pick and roll and the perimeter scorers for Indiana. So Giannis likes to set these picks with Brook Lopez will set picks for Giannis, and it's a switch between the 5 and the 4. It can be a disaster in moments where Pascal and Miles are guarding the 4 and 5, or Obi Toppin and Pascal are guarding the 4 and 5, or Aaron Nesmith is guarding the 4 and Obi's guarding the 5, or Miles is guarding the 5. It's going to be difficult. The 4-5 pick is a weird thing because you don't see it very often, but here it's dangerous because Giannis owns Miles Turner. He's like a 60% field goal percentage shooter over Miles Turner, which is wild. Because you would think Miles would be good at getting to the ball and getting a block shot and causing problems with his length. But for some reason, Giannis has always been really good about getting his body into Miles and throwing Miles off of him. And he hits those mid-range jumpers that Miles kind of does where he shows off a pick and Giannis is already up into a shooting motion and can't get to it. I think this will be the key to the series is being able to slow down that enough to where it's not causing you every single time to let Giannis to the rim and score or get fouls. If he gets fouls on Pascal or Miles, this becomes a very difficult series to win because those two are so vital to the offense that you're going to see a huge drop off if you have Obi Toppin and Thomas Bryant playing together or an Obi Toppin and Jarris playing together. Like I love Jarris, but I think that he's not going to be able to guard Giannis. And they would have to go to Aaron Nesmith, and Aaron Nesmith can get into foul trouble quite a bit. He's not quite learned that skill yet where he's been able to stay out of foul trouble more. He tends to be the one that fouls a lot more than the rest of the guys on the field, or not the field, the court. You got to slow down that pick and roll 4 and 5 for the Indiana Pacers, and then hope that Giannis is not hitting every single pass that he throws because he's become really good at that. Slow down the Pacers, play a lot of zones, make that defense just solid and make them beat you from the arc. The Pacers will struggle against the zone. We've seen it time and time again. Can the Pacers beat that? If I'm the Bucks, I'm playing zone until they beat me. And then win the bench minutes. Our bench has not been great. The Pacers bench, like I just said, it's not been great. If you can get AJ Green, if you can get Gary Trent, if you can get Porter Jr., if you get Portis to score and outscore the Pacers bench by 15, 20, you might have a shot to really do some damage in this series and make it a shorter series. The Pacers have really struggled with that zone. So, the bench minutes. I do. Looking at this series, kind of wrapping it up. It's been a really tough series to kind of like. I've gone back and forth a couple times. I'm like, Pacers could win it in 5, Bucks could win this in 6, Bucks could win it in 7. Pacers could win it in 7. Like, there's so many things, right? And people are like, I don't see it going 6 because I don't see the Pacers beating the Bucks in Milwaukee. I don't think that's the case. I think the Pacers actually play well on the road sometimes, especially with games in between. They're not a team that typically will struggle tremendously on the road. I think they thrive sometimes in those environments, but something about me feels like this is only going to go 6. Like, I feel like everybody's trying to post this as a 7-game series where the Pacers win because they just have too much for the Bucks. I'm actually in the belief that, like, I think that you start to notice the difference in the depth and just the ability for the Pacers to just keep coming at you and punching you from different angles. I just feel like the Bucks will figure this out by game 5 where they're just not good enough. And then the Pacers go in and win that in game 6 because I just feel like it'll be a tight game in game 6, but I feel like the Pacers will finally have that big punch to knock them out. Because to win playoff series, you've got to win on the road. I don't know if they win 2 games in the 3 and 4. I think that's where they drop some games. I could even see it going 2 in Indiana, 2 in Milwaukee, and then the Pacers winning 2. I could see that. I could see the Milwaukee winning game 1 or game 2 in Indy. And then, I could see the Pacers winning the first 2 games, Milwaukee winning 2, Milwaukee winning 3, then it's 3-2 Milwaukee, the Pacers beat it, and then go to game 7. I don't know. I don't feel like the Pacers always reacted really well to losses last year. I think the Pacers are still underestimated. I think people are still picking the Bucks, which should be a chip on the Indiana shoulder. I just feel like in this series, the Pacers have too many points of attack, too many places to go, too many people to stop, where the Bucks really have just the one that's going to take over. So Giannis is going to get his 40, right? I'm already prepared for him to drop 35 each game. I don't think the rest of those players are going to be up to snuff. The Bucks have the best player in the series, but I would say the top 5 players, the Pacers have the next best 4. So that's a lot. That's a lot to overcome. There's still a lot to be made of the fact that Kevin Porter's not played in a playoff series that's been meaningful like this, where I feel like he's had a true impact because he was with the Clippers, I think, last year. I just don't feel like Kevin's played in enough like this high stakes where he's the number 2 guy. I don't think Gary Trent is really a number 2, 3, 4 guy. He's more of a role guy. Kyle Kuzma is always underwhelmed, I feel, especially defensively. I don't feel like he's going to have a breakout game. He's just somebody that's just going to be there. Yeah, there's not many guys I'm scared of in this series. Gary Trent actually is one that I feel like could get hot and be a thorn. Um, but I'm not scared about their two options. They're with Kuzma and Porter. And Bobby Portis really doesn't like he started to kind of lose his allure, I think. He's just fiery at this point. I don't think he's as good as he was last year. Like last year he just felt like he never missed. I don't think he's that same thing this year. So I don't know. I'm interested to see what your guys' thoughts are, but my series prediction, if you want to leave yours in the comments below or at Twitter, you can message me or I even put a poll up on Twitter before I started recording. It says Pacers in 6. I agree. I think it'll be the Pacers that win this in 6, 4-2. I just feel like there's just too much talent on this roster right now. There's cohesiveness that goes a long way in the playoffs when you've got guys that have played together for 2 years. That's going to be a tremendous help. I don't think we know what Benedict Mathurin is capable of. He could be a total game changer, and I think people are really overlooking the season that Tyrese Halliburton has had because of how bad he was the first 25 games. And he's healthy. Last year, he was not healthy, and he's one of the better players in the Eastern Conference in the playoffs. This year, he is fully healthy and playing at a historic level. He's at a assist turnover ratio that's higher than anybody we've ever seen in NBA history, like including the likes of Chris Paul, John Stockton, some of the best point guards that ever played this game. Tyrese has already passed that ability to be able to pass and not turn the ball over. That's incredible for a player that young, 25 years old. Like that's unbelievable. That is unworldly. And yes, Giannis is the best player in the world, but Tyrese is one of the best point guards in the world. So I, I do feel like people underestimate that. Does he score 20 points a game? No. Can he score 20 points a game? Yes. Can he score 30 points? Yes. But his biggest thing is like, everybody else is so much better around him because of who he is and what he does that you just don't realize how good he is. Like he makes Aaron Nesmith look like a 3-point god at times. He makes Pascal Siakam look so much better at times. He makes Miles Turner so much better at times. It's unbelievable how open these guys get based off of how well Tyrese Halliburton penetrates and kicks. It's unbelievable. Like if you've not watched it before or listening to this for some reason at the 2-hour mark almost, I think you gotta watch it. You gotta look at this series, even though it's not on TV hardly anywhere. You gotta watch this because he's just so special when he's going. And I think against the Milwaukee team, it couldn't have lined up any better because he wants to beat the hometown team, the team he grew up probably watching. I'm not sure how he aligned with. I don't think I've ever heard if he really was a Bucks fan, but he probably was. But yeah, I think you got the kid from I think it's Oshkosh. It's one of those. A kid from Milwaukee area taking down the Bucks. I think he's going to be even more fired up this year because he's got that experience under his belt. And that's the other thing. Look at all these players that they were talking about that don't have experience last year, now have a whole full year of experience, except Benedict Mathurin. But Benedict is the only one that I really feel like really doesn't need it. Well, Jarris Walker too. But you look at Obi Toppin, you look at Aaron Nesmith, right? Toppin had some experience with the Knicks, but like it wasn't significant enough. Nembhard, Nesmith had some, but it was random throwaway minutes for the Celtics, about the Bucks. Yeah, Nesmith, Nembhard, Tyrese, who was it? Benedict, Jarris, like all these guys that had no experience and now have full experience, whether watching it last year or being on the bench and involved in it last year. All these guys know what to expect. Ben Shepherd. I just feel like it's going to go so much further this year. And I think people are overlooking things about the Pacers and are more focused on, man, Giannis could cause problems. But there's some things where I feel like the Pacers could really excel. One thing I didn't really talk about, and I guess I'll mention it here at the end. The one thing that I think, what can happen if, so let's do this. Pacers win the series if they limit those players around Giannis. Now, their whole focus is not going to be, let's just let Giannis score and just shut everybody else down. That's not it. That's not how basketball works. It's more about, let's not let other people kill us. because if these guys aren't having each, Kuzma and Trent or Kuzma and Porter aren't having 20 to 25 points games for some absurd reason, they're all having 25. That's when the Pacers lose this series. The Pacers lose this series if Giannis is scoring 50. Like, I think the record was like, if he scores over 40, they're almost impossible to beat. Let's not let him get to 40. Let's keep him in the 30 range, right? There's things you can do to limit some of what Giannis does, but not enough to where it's like you can hold him to 10 points or 20. Like, that's not acceptable. Like, that's never going to happen. But you can limit him to 32, 35. Like that is doable. You can take away other options. You can play defensive and play enough to where you've stopped him a couple more times than you would have. There are some things you can do. Pacers lose this series. If they aren't shooting the ball well and they don't get out to good starts. If they do not get out to good starts, the Bucks will win. Giannis minutes are very difficult to win. And if you start cold in one of these first two games, it could spell disaster for the Pacers. They're just, they worry me sometimes about the way they start. Pacers lose this series if Pascal Siakam continues to play the way that he played to end the season. If he's scoring 14 points a game, we've got problems because I'm pretty sure Benedict and Tyrese aren't scoring 25. Now, if Benedict and Tyrese are going nuts and scoring 30 each or 25 each, then Pascal can have his 14. But Pascal needs to be around that 18 to 20 each game. Pacers win this series if Pascal Siakam is up around that 20 mark. I just think if Pascal scores 20 points, it's very difficult to beat these Pacers. Pacers win this series if Miles Turner has more than 10 points. If Miles Turner is scoring more than 10 points, it becomes harder to beat the Pacers because you have to worry about him. If Miles is scoring 2 to 8 points, like, that's just not going to do it. Like, there are times where Miles has fizzled and gone away, right? And we've seen that. We've seen games where Miles has like a 6-point game, 8-point game, and 6 rebounds, and that's it. Like, that just won't cut it for the third best player on this roster. Pacers win this series if Tyrese Halliburton averages 20 and 10 and win it in 5. I think the Pacers will win this series in a landslide if Tyrese is like all NBA level, which he has been. I think the Pacers could actually surprise people and blow the Bucks out if Tyrese is averaging 20 and 10. Like, that's just impossible to beat, I think, at this point, with what that would do to unlock other players. Because scoring 20 is good, especially for Tyrese. But 10 assists each game, it means getting people involved that probably are elevating this team to a team that really could contend for a title. Last, Pacers win this series if they win the first 2 games at home. There is 0 chance the Bucks win this series if the Pacers win the first 2 at home. I'm going out here on a limb. Pacers win the first 2, it's over. I don't feel like the Bucks can really manage, even if they won the next 2. I don't think you can beat the Pacers that much at home. Like, I don't feel confident in them beating the Pacers 3 times. Two times, sorry, out of the last 3 games. It feels like if the Pacers win the first 2 games, while I won't relax, I would say that they are heavy favorites to win this at least in 5 games. So we'll see. That's the idea. The Bucks want to split this first 2-game series at home against the Pacers. They want to steal one. I don't know if they can. We'll see. It'll be up to Giannis. Giannis will have to do it. That's it for me. Anything else that you guys want to talk about, just drop it in the comments. We will be, after each game, recapping what's going on with these Pacers and Bucks. This is going to be a great series. Again, I got the Pacers in 6. I think it will be quite an interesting matchup, and I think one of the best matchups in all of the NBA. There's a 4-5 series out there in the Western Conference with the Denver Nuggets and the LA Clippers that I think will be very interesting. Let me look at I forgot to pull up my bracket. I am recording this on Thursday, and the last playing games have not been played. So the 8th seeds have not been determined yet. The 7th seeds have, but That being said, I don't think the 8th seed will matter in either of these series. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you what I feel like is going to happen in these playoffs for my last thing before we get out of here. I know this is a long episode. For the 1 versus the 8, so the Cavs, they will either take on the Miami Heat or the Atlanta Hawks. I believe it'll be the Hawks. But man, Miami looked really good against Chicago, so maybe it's Miami. But I don't think there's much of a chance anyway. Cleveland's going to win this series, and I'm going to say comfortably. I'm going to say in 5 games, Cleveland win. That's just too good of a team. 2 bigs that are going to be game changers, and I think 2 bigs that Indiana will struggle with some. 4 and 5 series, I already got this one picked out. Pacers in 6. I got the Knicks 3, the 3rd seed, and the Pistons in the 6th. Pistons are not battle tested. They have a really hard team. I think they ended up like winning only like 10 or 11 games against teams over 500 or something like that. Maybe 12. Not a lot. They had a losing percentage and a big losing percentage against teams above 500. People think it's going to be an interesting series. I don't think it'll be that close. I think it'll be a 5 game series. I think the Knicks win 4 and do it pretty easy. I know Cade Cunningham is good, but I really struggle to find where they're going to have another advantage. 2nd seed versus the 7th. So that'll be the Boston Celtics versus Paolo Banchero and the Orlando Magic. Orlando Magic will cause them some major issues defensively, but they do not score at all. They are a really difficult team to watch offensively. They just have too many injuries or had too many injuries at points. Suggs, Banchero, the Wagners both hurt. Like everybody's been hurt on that team. I just don't think they've got enough. And Boston is really good. I think it'll be a sweep. I think Boston sweeps them 4-0. Going over to the West, OKC versus the Mavs absolutely smoked the Kings and knocked them out. So they will be playing the Memphis Grizzlies for the 8th seed, but the 8th seed I think goes to the Memphis Grizzlies. OKC versus the Memphis Grizzlies. I don't have any confidence in the Grizzlies. Seems to be a lot of issues going on there with the firing of their head coach right before the playoffs. So I think OKC win this pretty easily. I'm going to go, you know what? I'm going to say 4-0. I'm going to say a sweep. I think that OKC destroys Memphis. I just feel like Memphis will have some implosion. I just feel like they're a ticking time bomb at this point. 4 and 5 series. Ooh, this one's fun. Denver, Jokic versus James Harden and Kawhi Leonard. I think that the Clippers have too much with Jamal Murray. Really, I mean, I don't know how much he plays or if he plays with that hamstring issue that he's kind of nursing. And with Mike Malone gone too, fired right before the playoffs, which is crazy. And we'll probably talk about this offseason when we cover the NBA in total. I just don't have confidence that Jokic can get it done by himself this year. I really do. I love what the Clippers are doing, and they're playing extremely well. Kawhi Leonard has kind of taken that backseat as the second best player, and James Harden has been MVP caliber. James Harden is really good, and I think they get one here. I'm going to say it goes 7 just to be safe, but I think the Clippers win it in 7 on the road. So, yeah, we'll see. Could be 6 for the Clippers. 3rd and 6th seed, Lakers versus Minnesota. I actually think that this one's going to be a blowout. I think this is a disaster matchup for Minnesota. The only advantage they really have is Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid, but I don't think that's much of an advantage at all. Lakers in 6. I'm going to go 4-2 Lakers win that one. I think the Lakers will at least drop a few, but they've been hot. They've been one of the best teams in the West. Houston Rockets, 2nd seed versus the 7th seed. Golden State Warriors, Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry. Those are 2 big playoff team or guys. You know, this one's really hard because Houston's battle tested, but not really. Like they're still young. They still got a lot of guys that haven't really figured out the playoffs yet. Whereas like Golden State, those are 2 of the best playoff players that you could possibly have on a team between Jimmy and. But I just feel like there's too many headaches there, and I know I think Golden State's favored in betting too. I just don't know if they've got enough. Like Steph can go crazy. Jimmy could go crazy. I just don't know. I got some confidence in the Houston Rockets. I'm going to go Rockets here. I just think they add too much here where they've got too much firepower. They've got places they can. I mean, Amin Thompson is really good. Green's really good. Shingun can absolutely play. I just don't know if I've got confidence in what seems to be a really a team that is well on their way to not being a really good team at all in Golden State. I just feel like Steph's age will eventually, and Jimmy, like I just feel like they're on the way back half of that, of the primes of those guys. But all right, next up, it's going to be back to the Eastern Conference with our Pacers versus Cleveland. I got the Pacers. I love the way that they play against Cleveland. They've done it without Tyrese Halliburton. They've had Jarris Walker go off on them. Cleveland, they beat the Magic last year, but also they just, I don't know. Something about that team. I'm not confident that Darius Garland can continue to be who he is. I think Miles Turner can at least play well against Jared Allen, Mobley, and Pascal too. Like I just feel like Pascal causes more of a mismatch issue. I don't know. I've got ultimate belief that the Pacers could squander what was a dream season for the Cavs. They were good, but I don't know. I feel like the Pacers' depth is better. And maybe the bench is not always produced like that this season, but I just feel like the Pacers are more battle tested than Cleveland, and they're going to cause a difficult time. Now, I think it'll go 7 games. I think this will be a 7-game series, but I do think the Pacers, and I'm trying not to show my bias, but I think the Pacers get one here and go back to the Eastern Conference Finals. You've got the Knicks versus the Boston Celtics. I've got no confidence that the Knicks can beat the Celtics. I don't think they beat them this year. So I'm going Celtics in 5. I think the Celtics handled them pretty easily. That being said, though, I would be very concerned being a Celtics fan. Jaylen Brown had injections into his knee, which is never good. That's like kind of borderline what goes on with like Kawhi. I'm trying to think of other guys that like Chris Middleton even. Like I don't even want to do that to Jaylen Brown but man, knee problems with injections this early, that's not good. That's really not good for a guard. So I'm concerned there, and the fact that like Jaylen Brown, there may be times where he can't go, and then Kristaps Porzingis too. Like he doesn't play every game, so I don't know. I think the Celtics are definitely more vulnerable than last year. That's what I will say. They're a good team. They're a great team. I just think they're more vulnerable this year. We'll go over to the West. OKC and the Clippers. This one was really hard. I almost picked Clippers, but I just think that OKC has enough. I think they've got enough this year. I think they're kind of sour off of that first round exit last year. I think that they're going to be much better this year. They've got one heck of an offense and an even better defense. I'm got OKC, but I'm going to go 7 games. OKC. Lakers, Houston. I don't have confidence in Houston in this one. I actually think the Lakers handled them pretty well. And in season, I do think they've handled them pretty well. I just feel like the Lakers have too much with LeBron and Luka. I feel like this is a very dangerous team. So I'm going to say Lakers in this one. So I've got the West looking like the OKC Thunder and Lakers in the Western Conference, Eastern Conference, Pacers, Celtics. I've got the Celtics beating the Pacers again. I think this one will be a closer series, but I got the Celtics in 6. I'm going to go Celtics in 6 with this one, and beat the Pacers once again to return to the NBA Finals. And then OKC Lakers. I've got the Lakers winning against OKC. I just I don't want to doubt a LeBron team. I really don't, and I feel like we're destined for this legendary Boston Lakers series for some reason this year, much like the old days. I would love to see it. It would be great TV. I think the Lakers are a good team, a great team when Austin Reeves plays like he does. I think this could be a really exciting series. Boston versus the LA Lakers. I do. I think the Lakers win the world championship this year. I've got championship Lakers on my board here. I might be crazy because Boston is crazy good, but I just don't know if Boston can stay healthy throughout this playoffs. I feel like they're the team that we're going to be talking about this year that just they couldn't stay healthy in the playoffs to really take down and defend their title. And I just feel like the Lakers are just firing on all cylinders right now. I feel like it'd be a great story. It goes with that storyline of Nico trading away Luka Doncic. Like this feels like it's destined to be a Lakers world championship this year for some reason. So I'm going to pick that. I'm probably wrong, but I don't know. I got the vibes in LA right now are just too high for me. I really do feel like the Lakers would get there. It'd be fun if the Clippers could beat OKC because I think OKC or Clippers versus Lakers in the Western Conference Finals would feed families. So those are my prediction for the NBA. That was my rundown of the Bucks and Indiana Pacers series. If you've listened this long, I really appreciate it. I know it's a really long episode, but I felt like we really had to talk about a lot of things, and there was even more things we could have discussed with the Pacers and the Bucks, and even in the NBA. But again, thanks for listening. If you want to follow us, I'm at the Pacers Fever Show over on X, Instagram, and Facebook. So if you just type the Pacers Fever Show, it is a play on the Pacers, and I'll cover the Indiana Fever once the Pacers are kind of dwindling down from their season, and the Pacers or the Fever start their season really soon. They actually play, I think, May 6th in Iowa with Caitlin Clark going back to Iowa. So we'll cover some of that, and I'll launch a Fever episode here shortly. So a lot of things going on, NBA playoffs, and then WNBA starting up real soon. They just had the draft, so we'll recap our thoughts on the WNBA draft. But we'll also talk about all things Indiana Pacers over the postseason. I'm hoping to have a recap episode after each of these games, and then maybe some episodes in between that we talk about different things that we want to discuss in length about the NBA and the Indiana Pacers. But again, thanks for following along and listening for this first episode. I know it was really long, but I appreciate you if you listen this far into the episode, and we will see you guys after the Pacers play the Milwaukee Bucks. Sorry, I was blanking. Pacers play the Milwaukee Bucks Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So we will see you after that game to recap all things Indiana Pacers.